of this great nation.
Take a look at what happened. I immediately knew it was very serious, that we were under attack.
The time has come, and this surely is England's time. Williams, who scores, and Spain lead. Shot from distance is in. It is called.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello, welcome to the show. Alex Phillips with you all week from 10 until 1, sitting in for Julia Monday to Thursday, and of course Friday is Alex time anyway, you lucky devils. Loads going on today, kind of a continuation on a theme really with the news. We've got Ukraine still in the front of everyone's mouths across Europe. We've got the ARC conference going on at the Excel Centre in London, where the great and the good of right-wingery come together for some sort of Glastonbury festival of common sense and thought. So we're going to be dipping in and getting the top lines out of that. Prison sentences, are they too long? Well, good old woke David Gauke, who used to be one of those soft, wet Tories, is now an advisor to the Labour government and thinks we're probably a bit too unfair to prisoners and we should just let them out instead. Nothing about toughening things up and making prison, really be a deterrent. Although I would say I do believe in rehabilitation. The problem is going to prison is pretty much like the finishing school of criminality. We're also going to be digging into how we could Doge the United Kingdom. Every single day now, finding more and more stories of the mad things we are spending our own foreign aid on. TikTok dancing, queer animals, pro-trans robots. You just couldn't make this stuff up. It's farcical, frankly, but the problem is, sunshine, you and I have been paying for that, haven't we? And apparently this country's broke. So a lot to get our teeth into, and I want to have all of your thoughts and comments and insights coming in today. So give me a call, 0344 499 1000. That is charged at the standard network rate. So it doesn't cost you a bob more than you spend anyway to phone for your takeaway. And don't do that. It's only 10 in the morning. At least wait a few hours. You can also WhatsApp me on the same number, 0344 499 1000, or leave me a lovely little voice note that I can play out on the airwaves. Sit back and relax while you do your part of the heavy lifting. 87222 is the number to text. Remember to write the word talk before your message so it wends its way into this here studio and doesn't get confused and go somewhere they wouldn't welcome it as much as I would. Or we're on X at talkTV, and I'm delighted to say on a day where I'm feeling a little bit sort of sleep hungover because I had insomnia last night, and I can't think of any better person to put a spring in my footstep and, bolster me on this beautiful Tuesday morning than Mr. Peter Barnes.
Hi, Alex. How are you doing? Long time.
I know, it has
It's been
a
ages.
while,
It's been
hasn't it? Yeah.
ages. Particularly since working together, at least.
Yeah, so we used to be like the Saturday
We
crew,
were,
didn't we? And it
yeah.
was just like Barnesy and Alex time.
Yeah, it really was.
And it's funny thinking back. Do you remember that show that we sat there and we just took people's ideas and opinions of how to save the UK money?
Gone.
It was gone. Yeah, it was brilliant. So I have a feeling, in case anyone missed that show on a Saturday, as we're talking about woke waste, that we should bring that back.
I think we should.
We should bring that
agree.
back and keep a running tally of how we are going to save this country a load of money. Because when you look over at America and what Elon Musk's Doge department is doing, it's amazing. I mean, Mile's done it in Argentina with the metaphorical chainsaw.
Yeah.
And here, we're just languishing in a quagmire of overspending on vanity projects and nonsense.
Agreed. But I always think, going back to what you were talking to with Mike about, is this deliberate or is this kind of just delusional? I think it's because people have been asking the wrong question. The government is obsessed with raising taxes rather than saving money. They're asking the question in the wrong direction. And I think if they started to say, well, how can we save, not how can we raise money, I think you'd probably start to get like the ideas that come into this station put into practice. I really do think it is that the mentality of the question is entirely wrong for the government.
Well, this is it. And when governments of the past, like Osborne and Cameron, decide they want to drastically save money because banks are rubbish, they essentially sold loads of our country off to the highest foreign bidder and then cut all the things that you don't want to be cut. Like actual policemen on the street. And,
like the nurses' bursary, for
doing?
example. Like the consequences of those cuts, I think we're starting to see see them play out. And you are right that we really do. This country consistently does the wrong thing at every single turn. When given an option between A and B, and A is like the worst thing we could do, but B is like, well, it's all right. We go for A every time. It is just obscene.
I mean, the most beautiful part of when Milei came into power in Argentina, and the economy's doing pretty nicely, isn't it?
Very well.
His sort of radical overhaul of everything is working. He just had this I remember the video of him standing in a room with all these bits of paper representing government departments and sub-departments, and he just took a whole department and was like, and I think basically we're at that stage.
I think we're there for a necessity rather than through want. I think like some of the things that we're going to talk about, it's just obscene. And then the politicians come in front of the taxpayers and say, well, we need more money, and I'm like, no, you don't. You don't need more. You don't need it.
You don't. And although we have played this game before, it's such a fun game to play. And it's so timely. I mean, we basically invented Doge.
Yes, yeah, we did.
About however many months ago, like 6 months ago
Yeah.
or something, we invented Doge. I think we play it again. Now, the good news is, I reckon good old Tech Op, who sits behind the glass there, will be a very... he's looking at me going, why are you bringing me into this? Because, Tech Op, here's news for you. I'm giving you a second job. You're going to wield the metaphorical chainsaw, and you're going to find out and keep a record of how much money we're saving. If you've got time to start Tech Up? Yeah, he's got time.
Oh, well.
All he has to do is press some buttons now and then.
Well, it seems
and what's
to
the
be.
difference between, the Cape Canaveral in there, add a calculator into the mix. See, this is what I reckon. So let's kick things off. We'll do this throughout the show, and by the end of the show, stay tuned till 1 o'clock. See what I did there?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go.
Audience retention. Stay tuned until 1 o'clock, and we'll give you the grand total of what Doge has saved the United Kingdom. Now, I'm going to do my first suggestion. You can do your first suggestion. And you guys as well, give me your suggestions. Every time, my favourite one is all of the devolved governments.
Yes.
Including all the mayors.
Oh, that was...
mayors.
Yeah.
So, devolved governments, we're talking Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales. If anyone can, send me a message, go, actually, if you do get rid of those, all of these things won't get done. I mean, the amazing thing is, Stormont in Northern Ireland didn't even exist. No one was in there for, how long? Like a year or something.
Easily,
And did Northern Ireland fall apart?
No.
No.
If anything, it did better without it, if I'm being honest. My one, don't forget police and crime commissioners. If someone can tell me the point of a police and crime commissioner, I'll pay for the lunch. What is the point?
Here we go. We'll kick things off. Ready for this? Then Tech Up. All the devolved governments, plus the civil servants connected to them, and the pensions. You've got to throw all of it in.
It's always the pensions. We never talk about civil service pensions.
I mean, the ones who have been there already, we're going to have to pay those, aren't we? But it saves a lot of future pensions. Police and crime commissioners and sort of Metro mayors.
Metro mayors,
mayors, there we go. We are starting with those. OK, your thoughts as well. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call to join Talk Doge. Or you can send us a WhatsApp message to that same number or leave us a voice note. Now, if you're sitting at home and you do want to participate in this, if you do a little Googling of your own and tell us how much it also saves, some money saved, that sort of, that alleviates the burden on our staff here. You can help out by doing that as well. 87222 is the number to text, right? Talk before your text. And you can tweet us on X at talkTV. Join Talk Doge. Right, now, let's turn our attention. We'll be coming back to this subject. Let's turn our attention to this conference that has been going on at the Excel Centre in London, I think around about now or already finished. I don't know. Farage, Mr. Nigel Farage, leader of Reform UK, is making a speech. But yesterday, it was the turn of the leader of the Conservative Party, Kemi Badenoch.
It was.
And she's really come out swinging, hasn't she?
She really did. I was actually in the room for it.
Oh, OK. So tell me your highlights, what you made of it.
I was very sceptical of Kemi going to this conference. It is a much more of a right-wing kind of populist kind of conference, and some of the attendees are, not necessarily the kind of people that I think a mainstream political party really should be associating with. But I would tell you right now, she nailed that, in my opinion. I think she hit it right where she needed to, not just for her kind of cementing herself as a kind of right-wing political figure, but also being able to say, look, I might be part of the Conservative Party, but there are bigger issues at play here. And I think she really got the balance bang on, if I'm being honest.
I mean, she talks about war on poisonous woke ideology, the left's useful idiots. Well, that was pretty much her party for the longest time. And essentially talking about the fact that Western civilization itself will be lost. And she says, if we throw this opportunity away because of anger or self-doubt or weakness. She doesn't really drill down into details of what this means. She talks about closing loopholes on immigration.
Yes.
I mean, the rhetoric sounds like I'm right in the middle of where the ex-Overton window is at this moment in time. Closing loopholes on immigration is sort of like, oh, sorry, that's still about 20 years ago. That was the Conservative manifesto.
This is where I would
then.
disagree, and this is where I think Kemi has hit the nail on the head much more practically. And I think this is with Kemi's point, is that you could, and she makes this argument about strongmen, and it's very signalled at Nigel Farage and at Reform. The undertone is very clear. And what her point is that you can make these grand overtures, you can make these big changes, but it is the technical changes, it is these small things that will make the bigger difference further down the line. And she goes on really within the speech to talk about kind of the abuse of the ECHR, which I think we'll talk about later. Was there these kind of nonsense things where you tidy that up, you could actually still keep the main framework, but you've just kind of tightened up the system, and that's what's needed.
Do you know what? We don't often disagree on things, you and I, Barnsley.
Yeah,
but I think we are way beyond poking around at the ECHR and tidying up this, that and the other. I think we need to actually be super radical. I think we need to, leave the ECHR as a no-brainer. I just cannot see that any sort of sovereign nation should allow unelected, unaccountable judges in a completely different nation be able to pick up the phone and go, don't deport him.
Yeah.
That to me is mad. That is so anti-democratic. It sticks in my core. We also need to sort of wipe out all of the precedent, the case precedent that's become baked into UK canon, including the Human Rights Act.
That's a big one.
Now, the thing is, if you sort of say to the public, we're getting rid of the Human Rights Act, all the sort of, legacy media and the leftists.
I think The Guardian just had a heart attack somewhere.
I think someone somewhere's heard that and is sort of reporting me to Ofcom right now.
Yeah.
But people misunderstand. It's the misnomer of Human Rights Act. It isn't. That is just the bucket of legal loopholes. It is a nonsense. Criminal law deals with this stuff. You know, you don't need to throw Human Rights Acts on top of it. And the judges.
It is.
How do we get rid of them?
I talk with Kevin O'Sullivan pretty much every Friday about the problem of UK judges, and I think this is the real point: is that whilst you could change the law, what we have to change is the culture around a lot of this stuff. Honestly, it takes time, and I think it will take decades.
Because the next lot of people coming up in law firms, we're going to have to wait about 50 years until we get sound people back in court.
Me and you will be in retirement homes by the time we even see an ounce of changing. in that, I think.
I see a lot of promise in the sort of 15-year-olds of
well,
today.
hopefully. But it is going to take, because this is the thing. If you have people who are adjudicating on the law who are of a certain mindset, that they will interpret it in that particular way. Yeah. And, you can, this is the point, you can repeal the ECHR, but if you still have judges that believe in that kind of policy, that believe in that kind of thing, they're going to interpret the law through that lens.
So do we need to get back to a situation where you've got like the Lord Chancellor in Parliament, a position which actually means nothing now, able to turn around and tell a judge to, go stick it because the Parliament says, actually, no, that person is being deported. Yabu sucks. I mean, I think that the thing is, when you put something like that in place, you run the risk of having, a Starmer on steroids acting in a tyrannical fashion. Yeah. But you kind of think, that is Starmer on steroids any different to those judges?
Well, that's the point, isn't it? It's the choosing the method of execution. The result is still the same, but it is. I think we're like you said. I think we're down the path that far now that it's looking like we're going to need something like that because of the way that our kind of legal system is now geared towards always in favour of asylum. It's always in favour of saying yes and not no. Yeah. And that's what we really need to change. And then when I look at the repealing of the ECHR, people have to stop thinking that's a silver bullet because there's so much
There's so much other stuff.
So much other stuff. I'm tired of people saying just reform it and everything goes away and it's all fixed.
Great repeal bill. Yeah. All at once. All at once. Flood the zone.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, we're going to take a short break now. When we come back after that break, it's your opportunity to join Talk Doge. 0344499 1000 is the number to call. Your standard network rate. See, we've doged that. 87222 is the number to text. Like talk before your message. You can use the 0344499 1000 number to leave a voice note or indeed send me a message on WhatsApp. We're on X at talkTV and come and doge with us after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
All right, you guys are doging up already. Thank you for that. Shall we hear a voice note, first of all, from Richard?
Hi, Alex. It's Richard from Bournemouth. Simple. Scrap the overseas aid budget. It's 16 billion a year wasted on mostly rubbish stuff. Great show. Good to see you. Good to hear you. Bye.
Well, you sound very enthusiastic. Yeah. Good to see you. Good to hear you. Do you know what? You are not alone, Richard, my darling, because Mark in Coventry says exactly the same thing. Foreign aid, gone. There we go. Gone. 16 billion we've saved already. We're getting the figures for devolved governments, police and crime commissioners, metro mayors. When we got those figures, we're going to add them all up together. But I mean, there you go. That's already 16 billion in a year saved. When you think that Labour Party black hole, second black hole, was 22 billion, we've basically cleared that thing.
Oh yeah, easily.
We've only just got started on one doging.
Oh yeah. I mean, like you said, the foreign aid budget is just absolutely ridiculous. ridiculous, and it funds absolute nonsense. But I will say that there is a role for foreign aid, but it's just not. It's not used correctly, and it's not used the way that it should be being used. It is somewhat of an international bribery kind of fund, but we don't use it effectively.
Well, the thing is, as well, I mean, first of all, the best way to elevate poor countries is to actually trade with them properly.
Trade over aid.
And that often requires a degree of foreign direct investment.
Yes.
Because we have a situation where we didn't get to do trade at all because the EU decided it for us, and all the big multinational companies brought in their bendy banana rules to make sure that Kenya couldn't sell tea directly to us. And so that doesn't create jobs in Kenya. And the sort of jobs, you know, the sort of grey-collar jobs that really begin to elevate a society. And instead what we do is send massive checks over to these places and say, teach Kenyans that women can have penises.
Yeah.
It's an insult. Why are we going to mess about and bring this poisonous ideology into their country? And when you speak to most Africans, they don't want this.
No,
they're
they
not
don't.
interested in this.
Yeah, you wonder why there's a small boats crisis? Because there's no jobs where they're coming from. Why there's economic migration? It's because of these kind of trade policies. That is what it is. You've got to invest in the places where these people are coming from so they don't feel the need to leave. They're coming to the West purely because this is where the money is, this is where the jobs are, because of the trade policies that have kept these countries in place. The European Union has kept these countries down deliberately, and we're now facing the consequences of it. There is nobody that can say that they support fair trade and free trade and support the European Union in the same breath. You can't.
And they bang on it that it's all climate change making people get on boats. I mean, that's just nonsense, isn't it?
Absolute nonsense.
I mean, let's look at some of these. So the 10 oddball schemes funded with your tax money is a little list that The Sun has kindly put together. They're just a few floors below us here in Talk Towers. Let's have a look. Shrimp farms in Bangladesh, which is mad. Electric Porsches for Albanian jails. What is that? Because all the gangsters in there can't sort of cope without being in some sort of sports car, but it also has to be climate compliant. Research on queer animals.
Oh, good God.
Using AI robots to make firms pro-trans. How does that... What does that even involve?
I want to know, and then I don't want to know the answer to that.
Some sort of hip-hop routine for TikTok. I don't even know. 150 quid bursary for students for that. University of Exeter got, oh my God, £250,000 for a project, Queer Natures, Animals, Environment and Modern Sexual Knowledge Production.
That's ridiculous.
Why do we need to know about gay animals for £250,000?
Well, do you know, this is one of the big ones that we never talk about, is how much money universities waste on this absolute nonsense kind of study and all the rest of it. Like, you know, these is thousands upon thousands of pounds across this country is spent on researching just idiotic nonsense, and it has to stop. You know, the university sector cries out, we've got no money. Stop funding that.
I mean, actually, here's some of them before we go to a call. Storying life courses for intersexual inclusion, ethnicity and well-being across time and place. £1.1 million. What? Critical dance pedagogy. 78,000, at least that one's not as much money. Policy recommendations to regain feminist losers as mainstream voters. Digital black dance ecologies network. Ontology and ownership of internet dance.
You notice none of this is STEM.
£200,000. None of it is STEM.
None of it's STEM. Do you know the thing that we actually need?
Yeah, well, exactly. None of that's going to build anything.
You want to know
why
why there's
repairing the roads or reopening Hammersmith
Why there's
Bridge.
no economic growth is because we're not investing in it. We're not actually giving the money to the things that we genuinely need. We're giving it so people can do a TikTok dance. Congratulations, United Kingdom. You wonder why we are in the situation we are. It's because of stuff like this.
Exactly. So there we go. Foreign aid budget gone. All the other budgets that pay for this in all the other departments, but we can't quite quantify that. Well, I'll see if I can find out if the Taxpayers Alliance has managed to quantify that. But yeah, $8 billion a year for UK research and innovation grants. Some of that might be useful.
Might be.
We'll have to work a bit harder on that one. Yeah. Let's speak to Pat, who's in London. Hi, Pat.
Hello there. Yeah, I mean, if you really want to save a lot of money, as like for defence and stuff, you don't have to cut nothing from councils or the NHS. You just get rid of Miliband's Green Dream.
Yeah.
Yeah, net zero.
Net zero.
Gone. Yeah, brilliant.
Look. China are going to show us the way. They're going to put space-based solar panels I mean, not now, but in, say, 15 years' time, they're looking to put, like, kilometre-long solar panels into orbit, a geosynchronous orbit above the Earth, where the sun never dies out.
Right. How do they then get the energy from these massive panels to Earth? I mean, I just don't know about this science.
You convert that energy into microwaves, beam it down to an Earth station, and then you reconstruct it back into electricity.
Right, China building a massive microwave in the sky. What could go wrong?
Do you know, this country used to lead the way in that kind of research, and we gave it all away. I think that's criminal. I think it is criminal what we did. You know, if you really wanted to push net zero about 10 years ago, that's how you do it. You fund that kind of research. Not, you know, we're going to charge the old ladies an extra 50 quid to drive the car around in London. You know, it is ridiculous that we became all stick and no carrot, and we stopped investing in the things that would actually drive the green agenda forward, and that would actually have made people's lives better, and not people choosing between heating and eating, which is what we've done. People like Ed Miliband talk a good game on the green stuff, but their entire directional kind of mode of transport, it is just all wrong. It should have been that stuff and not the way that we've gone. It is ridiculous, and like I said, it's criminal what we gave away.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And so much money just put in the spread of wokery. I mean, I think Arts Council funding has to be really called into question. I am all about
Scrap
making
the Arts
sure
Council. That
Arts
goes on the
Council's
list.
gone. I mean, I think that's a temporary scrap.
Yes,
because I'm all about, you know, when you've got sort of the National Gallery and this, that and the other, the National Portrait Gallery, we want to make sure those paintings are locked up so they can't be nicked, and I think that's quite important.
Yes.
We want people to be able to come and see that for free. I think that's a really lovely idea.
Great idea.
National Gallery is not so bad, but some of those other galleries and stuff like that, with their woke exhibitions, I'm like, if you had to survive commercially, putting this drivel on, you wouldn't.
Oh yeah, and you know, some of the stuff that the Arts Council funds is very questionable. You know, it's supposed to be a politically neutral organisation. It isn't, and you know, we have to have a real conversation about who's getting the money and what is the kind of value in it. You know, I'm not a big fan of art by committee, but sometimes you'd maybe just have to wonder, somebody in the room going, maybe we shouldn't give them as much as this other thing. But you know, I'm a big believer in the arts. I love the fact that museums are free in this country. I think that is a wonderful thing. But we do have to start wondering and questioning what's being given the money and what is the public value in that.
Yeah, audit the lot of it.
I like what Trump did. You know, I think it's to do with one of their kind of Arts Council organisations. You know, the woman who leads it has refused to do something, and Trump said, "Oh well, don't worry, we'll make it less woke, so it'll be good."
No. There you are. That
It'll be
says
good.
everything, doesn't it? Pat in London, thank you for your call. We're going to take a short break. If you want to continue throwing us your ideas for UK Doge, the number is 03444991000. You can dial that up anytime and register your interest to speak to us directly in the studio, and our crack team of brilliant producers will give you a call back when the time is right. Talk about efficiency. You can use that number for WhatsApp as well, and leave me a voice note on WhatsApp should you wish. You can text me 87222. Put talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV. Now, when we come back, we're going to be discussing the fact that, David Gauke, who's one of those wet Tories, is now advising the Labour government on how to stop overcrowding in prisons by, just making sure people aren't in prison for that long. Make that make sense. We're talking about that after this.
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, while we behind the scenes continue to doge up the UK with a fantasy list of all the things that we're going to cut, one thing that the Labour government are considering is cutting the amount of time prisoners stay locked up. That is because our packed prisons are on the brink of collapse, according to a government report. And what's being blamed for the overcrowding in our prisons, according to the Independent Sentencing Review, is knee-jerk and ill-considered attempts by ministers to show that they are tough on crime by essentially increasing the length of sentences. The number of people locked up in England and Wales has grown by more than 10% in the past 25 years. Now, the report blames successive governments for increasing the severity of sentences, leading to prison terms increasing by 40% since 1993, when the average custodial sentence length for indictable offences was 16 months. It's now 22.5 months. And it says that this hasn't been a deterrent. 37% of those leaving prison are likely to reoffend, the highest rate of reoffending after people serve sentences shorter than 12 months. All right, so if we're cutting sentences and we're saying, but the problem is people doing less than 12 months, it means they're more likely to reoffend. Make that make sense. Anyway, let's just speak now to Danny Shaw, policing, crime and justice commentator, former advisor to Yvette Cooper. Danny, great to have you back on the show. I see a lot of sense in talking about prisoner rehabilitation, because the problem we have now is a lot of prisoners go to prison and it ends up being the university of crime, and they're not trained in anything else. They're then reintroduced to society, having made even better contacts in the criminal underworld, go back into the networks and the communities that they're previously involved with, and just pick up where they left off. But is reducing prison sentences going to wave the magic wand and cure that?
It's not going to cure it, no. I think, Alex, you've hit the nail on the head. Look, prisons are incredibly important. They're vital at protecting the public. They're vital because they give the communities, neighbourhoods and all of us a rest from prolific offenders. For some people, they act as a deterrent. And they're also a place for some people where they can rehabilitate, where they can learn some skills, do some training and come out, hopefully, and lead more productive lives. But the problem, for me, the problem is not so much that sentences have got longer and that people are spending longer in prison. I personally think that was the right thing to do in response to concern about violent crime and sexual crime, where the sentences didn't appear to fit the crime. I think the problem is what happens in prison, as you say, that there's not enough productive work going on. There's not enough training. There's not enough effort going on into managing the transition between release from prison and what happens in the community. And so I think that is the key problem. There's been a lack of investment in opportunities in prison.
I mean, are prisons by and large too soft as well? Because there's one school of thought that a load of prisoners are sitting around smoking spice, playing on PlayStations and having a great old time. But other people I've spoken to have said, no, this is a myth that's been proliferated by right-wing media. Most prisons are really horrific places to be, and, you know, essentially run by very violent gangs where prisoners feel extremely unsafe and get deeper and deeper into, you know, the sort of lifestyle, if you will, for want of a better phrase, that we're supposed to be rehabilitating them of.
Look, I've been to quite a lot of prisons in my time covering policing and crime and justice, and I'm always absolutely delighted at the end of the day to be able to get out, because it's the deprivation of liberty. It's being locked in your cell. It's not being able to do what you want. That is the key thing. That is why most people, I think if you ask people who spent time in prison, they would say they absolutely hated it. The boredom is also something else. Of course, there are a minority of prisoners for whom the routine, the 3 meals a day or 2 meals a day, knowing that they got a place, a bed for the night, provides some kind of routine and comfort in a way, because life for them on the streets is really harsh and difficult. And then there are some who, you know, abuse the rules, abuse the system, smoke weed or spice, and they might have a TV set. But to be honest, I think for most people would say prison's not fun. It's not like it was in Porridge. It's not a a holiday camp at all. It's pretty grim. It's pretty boring, and in some places it's violent. You've really got to watch your back.
I mean, when you look at what's gone on in El Salvador, the massive crackdown on crime there, it looks pretty impressive. I mean, whether or not this is going to work in the long term, only time will tell. But certainly it's got all the sort of indications that actually a heavy-handed, strict approach over there has definitely got a lot of criminals off the streets at the very least. So much so that I think I heard the other day there might even be a deal between America and El Salvador to send some of their prisoners down, across the border to be taught a few life lessons. But a picture was put up by Bukele, the president of El Salvador, the other day on the internet, showing what looks like a massive aircraft hangar of prisoners all working. It looks like they're at sewing machines or something. And I've often asked myself this, and correct me if you think this is a mad idea. Some people say, oh no, this is going to be a pull factor. But I've thought, when you've got all these men who are at the moment put in army barracks and put in hotels, milling about doing absolutely nothing, have come into the country illegally, couldn't they be put to work in the fields of this country, where at the moment we're relying on a load of other young men coming from places like Lithuania? Why aren't we? Is it possible to use A, illegal immigrants, and B, prisoners to start picking up some of the slack in this country?
I think it's a really good idea, Alex. I mean, prisoners do some work. The difficulty is that there are two things. Firstly, some prisons are just not able or equipped to, have workshops and factories and so on site where they can do that. And obviously some prisoners can't do day release in the community. It's not safe. And the second thing is that when they're released from prisons, there are some employers that will take ex-offenders on, but there are many that don't want to take that risk. In terms of asylum seekers, there's basically rules that say anyone who claims asylum cannot work for 12 months. And then they can only do it with the permission of the government if it's in an occupation where there's a shortage of labour. So you've got a lot of people who are waiting up to 12 months for their asylum claims, and they are not allowed to work. So what they do is they might end up going into the black economy, doing work that way. Right. I personally agree with you. I would relax the rules, and at least for a trial period, to see whether you can get some of those people who are living in hotels, and we're all paying for it. We're paying for it with our taxes to go and fill some of those shortages. I would try it out to see whether it acts as a pull factor for other people coming in, or whether it makes no difference and actually it does plug some of those gaps in the labour force.
Right, I actually think it wouldn't be a pull factor if you said, taxpayers are paying for you. You've come into this country and we're sticking a roof over your head. In the meantime, collect some dustbins, sweep some streets, clean some toilets, pick some fruit. I'm not saying give them jobs in the tech sector where they're rolling around on beanbags at Google or something like that, but, give them the jobs that we constantly say Brits don't want to do. And I think if people getting on boats thought that, they'll arrive, they'll be put into, very basic accommodation and then, made to put on a jumpsuit and go out and, scrub graffiti off walls, they'd be less inclined to come over here. I don't understand why we haven't joined these dots together, unless, of course, it's probably in ECHR legislation that we can't do that.
It's not. It's not, Alex.
Is it not?
It's a decision by the previous government, and this government has carried it on. You can't work if you're claiming asylum until at least 12 months have passed.
Right. So actually the government would be perfectly entitled to say you can work, but it's got to be in all of these government-approved schemes. And like I said, our local authorities massively strapped for cash. I don't think we should necessarily pay these asylum seekers. The food, the roof over your head is basically, your recompense. And I don't think that's particularly too strident. Don't come over and get all this stuff for free. Pull your finger out, sunshine. Now, talking about migrants, we've learnt that migrant hotels are set to be used for 4 more years as Labour pushes back the deadline again. Well, it's just going to keep going back and going back because smashing the gangs isn't working. We're talking about packed prisons. We're now at the situation where certain asylum centres, there was a particular one in a village in Essex near Braintree, you might know the one I mean, that's going to potentially have 200 more people added to the 600 that are already there, something like 600. And the number of migrants in this, I think it's an old army barracks, is going to outnumber the number of villagers. And not just that, the doctors who are working in that huge asylum centre say that around 75% of them are mentally disturbed because they've come from extreme violence. And these guys are just wandering around. They're allowed to get a minibus into Chelmsford or Braintree. They're just wandering around in the streets. And you think to yourself, at what point is this going to create a disaster?
Yeah, I've actually been to Wethersfield, which is what you're talking about, and to the area around there. It's completely ill-equipped for an asylum centre or for a prison, which was the original idea. Because it's in the middle of the countryside, it's surrounded by small villages, the infrastructure around it is non-existent. The roads, there are small country roads. As you say, the nearest town, I think, is Braintree. So they go there to Braintree and just sort of mill around, not very much to do. It's a nightmare, frankly, for local residents and for the people who are there, who don't really have very much support in the centre either. And it's a consequence of the fact that we've just got this huge backlog of asylum claims that was allowed to grow under the previous government. And this government is trying to get it down, but it's going to take years. And as you say, a story that I did today in the Telegraph with Charles Hymas, stating that we now know that backlog in hotels, asylum seekers in hotels, that's going to be there for the next 4 years because it's proving so difficult to process applications, and then you've got more people coming across the channel in small boats.
Danny Shaw, it's fantastic catching up with you, a man of great common sense. Right, we're going to take a short advert break now. If you want to join the conversation, the number is 0344 499 1000. You can register your interest and we're going to call you back a bit later on in the show. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp or indeed leave me a voice note on WhatsApp. 87222 is the number to text. Remember to write talk before your message. We're on X at talkTV. Barnsley and I are back after this break.
We sent £5 million to Iraq on a transforming feminist funding project. My personal favourite, £500,000 to Albania so that it could buy electric Porsches for its prison system. I mean, I'm not against the concept of a big economy like ours, a rich economy trying to help some of the developing nations, although I think we certainly should be cutting back on it in these present financial circumstances.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Now, if you've been listening since 10 o'clock, well done you. And if you haven't, where have you been? What is the excuse for your tardiness? Peter Barnes and I have decided we're going to Doge up the UK, taking inspiration from the wonderful Milei in Argentina with his metaphorical chainsaw, and of course, good old Elon Musk and his crack team of sort of, you know, tweeny AI.
I love the name Muscovites. The Muscovites, I think, is a great name for them.
Aren't they all like 19-year-old boffins?
Yeah, but this is the thing, is that everybody's kind of, well, they don't know anything. But don't you want 16-year-olds to vote?
Yeah, also they don't need to know know, they've just designed awesome technology that just goes and, does a sort of thorough sweeping eyes on and sort of kicks out everything that we should know about. Now, I think this is a brilliant recommendation. Lorena in Nottinghamshire, I can't believe it's not on the list already. Lorena in Nottinghamshire says, "Morning, Alex. One of the thousands of ways I would cut expenditure is to stop legal aid for appeals for migrants."
Agreed.
That's I'm going to whack that down there. I think it should just be, you've come in illegally, you're gone.
Yeah.
I mean, look, no, actually not legal aid, you just have the case and that's it.
Yeah. 100%.
And it's decided. You don't get the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh opportunity.
No,
you just
crazy.
have one.
And I would remind you, Shabnam Mahmood, the Justice Secretary, is on about increasing justice legal aid for that specific reason.
I swear that a lot of these immigration lawyers, I'm not saying it's a majority, but a lot of immigration lawyers, because they're dotted around in strange places.
Yeah.
I reckon some of them will have connections to the gangs.
It wouldn't
like,
surprise me.
Yeah, here's the boat. When you get on the other end, go and speak to this guy over here, and you'll be taking a little cut, and, I'm certain. I'm certain. And how do these people get 4, 5, 6, 7 appeals? I just don't... It doesn't make sense to me at all.
No, it doesn't, and I think this is the thing, is it seems so vastly complicated, so people stop asking questions, when realistically, that's what we should be asking the most questions about.
Right. Exactly. Alan in Nottinghamshire says, "Hi Alex, scrap net zero spending." That's a popular one. Yeah. Green energy subsidies. That's all part of the same thing, one assumes. Reckon there's at least 15 billion quid. No, it's got to be more than that. It's like 150 billion, isn't
it? Easily.
I'm going to have to start finding out numbers for this. Come on, Tech Up. Where's that calculator gone? 10 billion for what? Net zero? Is that annually? All right, 10 billion a year. We'll work it out on an annual basis, and then we'll add some sort of, inflation at 4.55%, and come up with, how much we could save over a decade eventually. But also, Alan points out we should get rid of GB Energy. That thing's a joke. Wasn't that like 9 billion?
Yeah, that's about 9 billion quid.
Billion.
And the carbon capture programme that was 22 billion. That's been proved that it's not going to work.
27. Let's whack that in there. Carbon gone. Carbon capture, 22 billion. I mean, this is absolutely insane. Without really doing anything, we've already saved about 70 billion quid in a year. Just one year. Let's move on. But we are going to be coming back to UK Doge, so keep your thoughts coming in. Let's talk about Rachel Reeves. I mean, what else is she told porkies about? It's a new thing every day, isn't it?
They always say there's noise around people. This woman is being followed around by a brass band. It's ridiculous.
It's just mad.
It's absolute craziness.
So, first of all, she said she was an economist at, was it HBOS or something, when Rachel from Accounts basically just was in the complaints centre with those little headsets maybe, like, hello, how can I help you? Maybe not, I don't know. But then, weirdly, she's at the complaints centre, and it seems to me, allegedly, she's defrauding the company and gets investigated herself, which is just... And not just that, this is how mad it gets. Not only was she, spending loads of money on champagne, earrings,
seems to be like a little racket of them.
Yeah. She was giving them to her bosses.
Yeah.
That's mental. Robbing from the company, giving it to your boss.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure if I went and ransacked the stationery cupboard and went and knocked on Denny's door and said, "Here you go, look at all these free envelopes I've got you," he'd be like, "Get out."
Yes, pretty much.
Actually, you'd probably find it quite funny.
Yeah,
maybe I should try that after the show and update you on what happens. But now, Rachel Reeves apparently is wrongly claimed to have had work published in one of the world's leading economics journals. Yeah. Next time she's going to have said she invented the Laffer curve.
Well, it reminds me when Gordon Brown invented the internet. Do you remember that one? Do you not remember that?
No.
Yeah, he stupidly said in some speech that he was part of the invention of the internet. It was a fumble of words. But it was a fumble of the words. But I mean, when we talk about Rachel Reeves, I mean, this woman is just surrounded by so many lies. But this one at HBOS, And this accusation around her kind of this defrauding stuff is a very serious one, because this woman is in charge of the economy. It's about trust in our politics.
Our money.
Yeah. And I mean, Keir Starmer, I would remind you, said that he would come into politics to clean this kind of stuff up. So
Right.
how has she still got a job?
Is she still there? Let's speak now to Fraser Myers, Deputy Editor of Spiked Online and host of the Spiked podcast. I mean, Fraser, we laugh at this because Rachel Reeves is the gift that keeps on giving, probably nicked the gifts herself. But at the end of the day, this isn't actually very funny. If you were a leading university academic and you had said, you know, I've written this brilliant piece and had it published in the journal Nature, and it turns out that it wasn't, even if you just said it was peer-reviewed and it wasn't, you're going to be a laughing stock in the academic community and probably lose your position. And there she is, managing the entire country's money.
Yeah, it's extraordinary. I mean, she claimed to have published something in the Journal of I've actually forgotten, the Journal of Political Economy, but actually she'd published in the European Journal of Political Economy. Now, that sounds to us like a distinction between the Judean People's Front and the People's Front of Judea, but actually to academics it really matters. The Journal of Political Economy that she claims to have published in is really prestigious, really selective. It's like the difference between saying you graduated from Oxford University when you really graduated from Oxford Brookes. You know, there are so many accusations like this that hang around Rachel Reeves that you just alluded to, you know, calling herself an economist at HBOS. She's exaggerated the amount of time she spent at the Bank of England. She's told interviews that she was there for a decade when really it's more like 5.5 years. On certain websites, she's put the wrong dates. There's also been accusations around her plagiarizing her book on female economists. So the problem is the pattern. You know, one of these mistakes you could say, well, it's an honest mistake. Anyone could make this mistake, especially, you know, talking about dates. Some people embellish their CV. Some people might find that relatable, that Rachel Reeves has embellished her CV. But when it keeps happening again and again, you have to ask serious questions. Now, I'm not saying that she should be sacked necessarily, but it's definitely the case that if this were happening in Europe, similar scandals have brought down government ministers in Germany, particularly around essentially exaggerating academic qualifications. That's caused huge uproar over there. But, you know, she does have questions to answer. The bigger questions, of course, are really about her handling of the economy. That's where we should put much more pressure on her, because she's not doing a good job.
No, absolutely not. And this is the thing, this sort of litany of little fibs constantly and embellishments and the artistic license she applies to the fantastical world of her own past, her own hinterland. You have to wonder when she's turning around and she says, oh, well, you know, when we put the inheritance tax on farmers, it's only going to affect a few farms here and there. It's only going to make us 500 mil. And you think, well, why bother doing it? And then we get reports from DEFRA going, And that's Whitehall. You know, these are the government civil servants going, And then, of course, it's the sort of 9 billion black hole, which becomes 22 billion, which becomes 40 billion. And when it comes to these little exaggerations, if you're applying that same approach to a wave of the hand about national insurance being inheritance tax being applied to farmers, wave of the hand of the economic impact of an increase in employers' national insurance, how many pubs are going to go bust, what this is going to, you know, cost subsections of social care and the NHS, which apparently need a lot more resourcing and a lot more funding. When it comes to the sort of rounding up a number or not being entirely honest, it's a big problem.
Yeah, and you don't need to be an economist necessarily, a professional trained economist, to be Chancellor of the UK. Most of them are not. But what you do need to know, and you don't have to be an economist to know, that putting a tax on jobs is bad for jobs. So we've just seen the job growth figures slowing after Rachel Reeves' national insurance rise. You don't have to be an energy expert to realise that actually putting all your eggs into renewable energy, which is intermittent because, you know, the wind doesn't blow all the time and the sun doesn't blow all the time, increase energy costs and lowers growth. So you don't actually need the expertise that Rachel Reeves is claiming to have. It's odd that she is exaggerating her skills and qualifications. It was never necessary for her to get that job. But you do have to question what we need to question is her political judgment above all. You know, it's her why is she making some of the claims she's made around the importance of the farmers' tax? Why is that so? Why have they chosen to pick on farmers in that instance? Why have they chosen to pick on pensioners? The amount they're saving from cutting the winter fuel allowance is minuscule, and yet they're going to pay a huge political price because it's angered people all across the country. There seems to be no political judgment and no political sense. That's what I think she's missing.
Where's the outrage here, right? Because what we've heard is that Keir Starmer's probably going to keep her right till the end of the term. That's what people have said to me. Let's see if that's true. But where is the political outrage? Because Boris Johnson was often labelled as being a perennial liar. It was sort of painted as being part of his character. And during the whole what did or didn't happen in Downing Street, did he eat cake? Did he not eat cake? Was there a glass of Prosecco? Was there not a glass of Prosecco? Was he in a room for 5 minutes just making a toast, or was he there vomiting up a wall? It all came down to the integrity. It all came down to whether you can trust him. And in the context of whether he ate a piece of cake or not ate a piece of cake, rather than nicking money from your old employer, lying on your CV, pretending you got work published in a journal where you didn't get it published, I think the Rachel Reeves offence seems a lot worse in terms of scalability. And yet the confected outrage from elements of the legacy media is just not present.
I think if you're in the Labour Party or you're in the legacy media, there is a sort of holier than thou sense. Lying is something the Tories do, or lying is something that Reform does, or Nigel Farage does. And you could see the same with many of the sort of scandals that were emerging around Lord Ali and Starmer's glasses, when they first came to power. There was this sense that, well, it doesn't matter when we do it because we're ultimately good people. I think you're seeing the same thing here with Rachel Reeves. Starmer is backing her because she's one of the good guys. There's probably also the fact that Starmer actually doesn't know what he thinks about the economy, and she's been pretty central to his ideas or his program for the economy. I mean, there isn't much of a program, but you see what I mean. So he's going to be reluctant to sack her for that reason. But yeah, they obviously hold themselves to much lower standards than they expect of other people.
Yeah, I mean, I had heard basically that, and I don't know if this is true. Barnsley, you might know this, or let's see if Fraser knows. But, you've usually got a lot of good political gossip. I had heard that Starmer definitely didn't even really read that budget and probably sign off on it, because a bit like Fraser say, he ain't got a clue. He's more interested in trying to pretend he's a geopolitician. That's not really working out well for him.
No.
But also I had heard that she didn't even really write it. It's some other wonk who she has in her sort of, spatosphere. And they did all that work, and she just sits there and has her photo taken in front of some commie woman who's been hung on the wall. Yeah. I mean, what's the truth of this? Did she write those figures and come up with those policies?
I've heard the same stories that Rachel Reeves is vastly, out of her depth on a lot of this stuff, and a lot of the SPADs do a lot of the heavy lifting, a lot more than with other chancellors. But the interesting you pick up on the legacy media point. The reason that they don't go after her on this is that they worshipped her in the general election. There was a headline that she was Labour's secret weapon. That was a genuine headline.
She's just a weapon.
They would actually have to look at themselves and say, we got this wrong, and the legacy media will never do that.
They'll never
admit that they got this wrong on this one. She faced no criticism, no investigation throughout with her time as Shadow Chancellor, and that was a big problem of kind of the scrutiny of the Labour Party before the general election. It was non-existent. You've got certain people in certain positions now in the Shadow Cabinet that are just lunatics and woefully underqualified to be an MP, let alone in the Cabinet. And, the legacy media would have to start saying, well, come on, we've got to start doing our jobs properly, and it's never going to happen.
It's never going to happen, and all the noise is made of, she's the first female Chancellor. God. It's like, have you not noticed at this point we've had 3 female Prime Ministers?
Yeah.
Like, what? It's almost like, women can't add up normally. Well, guess what? Neither can Rachel Reeves.
I really wanted the Tories just to put, say, a female Chancellor in, just so that they could swipe that away from the Labour Party just before the general election.
That would have been good. That would have been good. Anyway, final thoughts from you, Fraser. Do you think she's going to last? Starmer says he's going to back her, but, I don't think he's going to be too averse to throwing someone under the bus if he needs to.
Yeah, I think that's what it will come down to. Will there be too much pressure on Starmer to get rid of her? I think this story will go away as developments happen in Ukraine or around Ukraine. He'll be able to ignore it for a bit. and he doesn't particularly want to get rid of her, but if he will do anything to save his own skin. So if it comes to that, I think then she'll be the first out.
She'll be curtains, yeah. Thank you ever so much, Fraser Miles from Spiked Online, host of the Spiked podcast. We're going to be taking a short break in just a moment, but when we come back, we're going to continue doging the UK, and we want your suggestions of what we should be cutting so far. Devolved governments, gone. Police and crime commissioners, gone. Foreign aid, gone. Metro mayors, gone. Net zero, gone. The Arts Council, gone. Legal aid to migrants, gone. GB Energy, gone. Carbon capture, gone. We're gone, but only for a few minutes, but we'll be back straight after this.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. It's Barnsley and Alex Phillips sitting in for Julia Hartley Brewer. We're going to be with you through till 1 o'clock, all week, in fact. Well, so far, in the first hour of this programme, we decided we were going to Doge the UK. And, oh my goodness, good old Tech Op has actually made a spreadsheet so far. I knew he'd be up for the job. You just know with Tech Op, when he sits there, I'm like, this is going to be fun. He gets that all sorts of, we know he likes his buzzers and his sound effects as well. He just gets those out of nowhere, who knows where. So we've got, there you go.
So his comedy timing is perfect.
It is absolutely perfect. I love that man to the ends of the earth. He's such good value. Unlike the devolved government of Scotland. So we've calculated our doging so far, and this is what we've got. Devolved government of Scotland costs 42 billion a year. Oh. In Wales, 22 billion a year. In Northern Ireland, 16.6 billion a year. Police and crime commissioners, 10 million. Those ones. Metro mayors, 1 million. That seems quite cheap.
That's cheap.
That's
That
quite
seems
cheap.
a little low, I think.
I reckon we could factor that up a bit. Overseas aid, 16 billion. Net zero, 10 billion. This is all just per year, remember. The Arts Council. Whoa, do you know what the Arts Council gets?
It's quite a lot.
Yeah, 446 million.
Yeah.
So it's $500 million. That is a lot for a few
It's a
paintings
lot.
and some
Yeah.
sort of, intersectional
Yeah,
exhibitions.
how much interpretive dance can you get for £500 million?
I know. Gosh,
So much.
imagine. It would be like a whole sort of, what are those things called when people used to jump out on Facebook and do impromptu dance routines?
Flash
Flash mob.
mobs.
Like a national flash mob. GB Energy, 1.7 billion. The carbon capture programme, 20 billion. So in 1 year alone, I don't even know how to say the number that's on the screen for what it's going to so far cost over a parliamentary term. But for 1 year alone, we've managed to save, as a collective, just 1 year, 64.8 billion.
What?
64.8 billion in a year. Oh, what was that?
I don't know.
I actually don't know myself. I actually think that I have no idea what just happened there. We'll find out during the next break. Now, over the course of 5 years, this is 324 billion. At what point does it become a trillion? One more integer.
Yeah.
But still, I mean, 324 billion, that makes the sort of moaning about a 22 billion pound black hole look like nothing.
Yeah, it does,
We've already closed that black hole, and we've got another 42 billion left to play with.
I know, yeah.
Imagine
Billion
all the
here,
things we
billion
could
there.
do.
Eventually it becomes real money, I guess.
Yeah, and can I just say, look at this, ladies and gents. Look at that. Tech Op is an absolute king, being able to press buttons and do all that at the same time. He's a multitasking absolute monsoon of genius. Right, now let's get back into the news. It's been pretty chilly, hasn't it?
Yeah. I mean,
Hasn't
I'm
it?
a
It's been a
northerner,
long winter.
and even I've thought it was cold.
It's been whatever's by my feet is making a lot. I have to roll back a little bit. Okay, I'm just going to ignore it like a true professional. Millions of pensioners went cold in their homes last month because of the decision to means test winter fuel payments, which actually meant essentially most people don't get them anymore. New figures showed 3 in 4 pensioners were living in uncomfortably cold homes in January, equivalent to 9.1 million people. The charity Age UK will be delivering a petition with 650,000 signatures to Downing Street demanding action to ensure it can never happen again. I mean, what makes me sick to the back teeth about this is essentially, what was the amount of money saved by cutting this? It was sort of, drop in the ocean when it comes
it's
to...
hardly anything.
It's hardly anything when you look at all this other nonsense that we're sort of spending money on for absolutely no reason. And these are people who have paid into the system their entire lives. There are very few pensioners out there right now who haven't had long lives of hard work. Theirs was not an era where you could sit around and just sponge off the welfare state. They've contributed. They've the backbone of our society. They've often built our society. And we don't even have the decency to make sure that in their old age they're comfortable.
I know, it's criminal. It is nothing short of a crime. And I think it's very telling that we seem to care more about the human rights of people coming to this country illegally than we do about the people who have built this country with their own, just incredible skills. It's staggering to me that we have in the United Kingdom people choosing between heating and eating. That is the UK in 2025. I do not understand how people are not out on the streets over this. It's just incredible to me.
So apparently this is going to be saving the UK government about £1 billion or something, the winter fuel allowance, getting rid of it.
Yeah, it's roughly that.
And yet, legal aid for immigration is 49 million. So, double the amount of that is that saving, basically. And overseas aid, 16 billion.
Yeah.
So you can't just carve £1 billion off the, TikTok dance classes and, girls with willies classes in Kenya and shrimp farms in Bangladesh to pay for pensioners. That's my nana and granddad. You know, those are people, those are relatives who brought us up, who worked hard. It makes me sick to the back teeth. And you know what? I'm going to be a little bit inflammatory here because I don't care. I'm fed up with kowtowing to this invisible woke elite who tell me what I can and can't say, what opinions I can and can't hold. And you said they built this society. I can't help these days when I'm going around, because I live in central London, and when I look at actually our beautiful edifices, our buildings, some of the wonderful streets. If you've ever gone to Whitechapel and seen, you know, yes, it was always been a bit of a poorer area, but the beautiful old cottages and these are buildings, these are roads, this is infrastructure that our grandparents made and their grandparents. That, you know, it took centuries of people building this nation. And when you go to some parts of the country and people are living in these houses that someone's granddad or someone's dad laid the bricks and mortar for, you know, that people have paid for as part of this economy. And then they have the audacity in some parts of London, or, you know, let's say after the Hare Hills riots, to just trash the place.
Trash it,
To trash it. They don't care at all.
No.
Because it's not theirs. It means nothing to them. They've got no emotional connection to it because it wasn't their parents and their grandparents who built it. And at the end of the day, that stands for something. Now, I'm not saying that is true of, you know, all in. Of course I'm not. Absolutely, of course I'm not. But there is definitely now an underbelly of people who have come over here who are ghettoised. I've seen it the same when I lived in Brussels. When you go to certain parts, the sort of no-go zones, as they're called, of Brussels, and the graffiti everywhere and the trash. And you just think...
I know.
I can't.
But just going back to the winter fuel allowance, I would remind people that when Rachel Reeves fiddled with the borrowing figures, she found herself with a little bit of a surplus. And the people said, well, just give the winter fuel allowance back. And Rachel Reeves and the Labour government said
cut, right?
no. Yes. They said no. They were given the opportunity to give the money back, to reinvest in that scheme, to make sure that our grandparents and, you know, people's aunts and uncles and things like that had the money to be able to pay for the heating on. And the Labour government said no.
Yeah, and what did we see?
That is what must be remembered.
What did we see in those WhatsApp groups, the Labour WhatsApp groups? It was very telling. They actually were joking about hoping that some of these people did die. I mean,
they had the audacity
let's not forget, they said that
guys.
at Brexit, didn't they? They said, oh, well, half of those voters are going to be dead anyway. It is sick.
The insidious nature to which this government and the people that support it talk about the older generations is actually very, very problematic.
It's nasty.
And it is nasty and it's
sociopathic,
vicious.
It's nasty, it's vicious, it is deeply worrying. Let's speak to Anthony now, who's in Southend. Hi there.
Hello.
Hi, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I was just listening to you chatting about this winter fuel allowance. I don't get it. I'm 75 years old. I've been in business all my life. And I had a business where I was collecting £25,000 a month, national insurance. And I had to pay that on the 19th of every month. And that was for a number of years, £25,000 a month. And I've been stitched up on 300 quid, you know. And I'm one of the people that I like to think started small businesses, turned it into a big business and contributed to the country, and now they don't want to give me £300 worth of fuel.
It's not just a slap in the face. It actually makes me want to cry. You know, it really does. It upsets me so deeply. The unfairness, injustice really, you know, has an emotional effect on me. Now, I often think about this in my own life in the context of me, but not in some sort of narcissistic way, but in terms of I've constantly under IR35, get absolutely rinsed by taxman, absolutely rinsed. You know, we're talking 50 to 60% of what I earn seems to be going to taxman. I'm 41 years old. I can't afford to buy a house. I don't have any dependents. I have private medical insurance because I'm so afraid if something happened to me, I'd just be left rotting in a corridor. So I basically don't cost the state anything, right? And yet the amount of money I put into the state is a lot. And then you got people coming in, being given a house, you know, in the borough that I live, which is nicer than mine, because they had the audacity to break the law and break into the country. Absolutely not.
Let me tell you about another little thing. You were talking about migrants earlier on.
Yeah.
I can't tell you too much detail, but I can tell you my son's in the army.
Right.
And he was ordered to go down to a particular place in Kent, which were holding migrants, illegal migrants, and he had to take an amount of soldiers down there to clean the toilets. Because they were in such a bad state that they had to have soldiers on site to clean the toilets for these illegal migrants.
What?
But I don't want to go too far into what, why, where, and when. I'm telling you the truth. This is the truth. And I thought that when my son told me, and he had to order these soldiers to do this, and to say there was a little disquiet was an understatement.
Our armed forces, our brave young men who stand ready to defend this nation, thank your son for his service, please. I don't think we say that enough in this country. Thank your son for his service. But how dare the government treat... they don't pay our armed forces enough anyway. When they come back from duty or they retire, the support to veterans is utterly disgusting. It's atrocious. So many veterans are homeless. And then they're asking armed forces to clean the bogs because migrants have left it a mess. Why aren't they cleaning it themselves? What are these people, the Queen of Sheba? I mean, look, we can't verify a story journalistically. That is what we need to do. But I have no doubt, I have no reason to doubt you, Anthony, about this. But I mean, that has just left me...
Well, do you not remember when
I'm speechless.
Would you not remember when they all went on and started like living on the streets outside of these nice 4-star hotels in Kensington because the rooms weren't up to the standards to what they wanted? You know, we roll out the red carpet to these people and they spit in our faces. That at some point we have to say enough. We have to say enough.
If I had someone who's genuinely fleeing from a war zone, genuinely fleeing persecution, I would be happy to be safe.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, and also someone sent me a message the other day, is people fleeing from war are women and children, people going to war are young men. And this is the thing that makes no sense. I would have far less concern about taking, well, no concern at all. I would desperately want us to be taking poor persecuted Yazidi women from Syria.
Oh, yeah.
Some of these Afghanistan women who are being treated horrifically. Not the men.
No.
Not the men.
The greatest lie ever told is that these people are refugees. They are not. They are economic migrants, and it's about time we started calling it for what it is. And I am, like you, Alex, I am just exhausted of this story because we're not dealing with it. We're welcoming them in. Boatload after boatload. Well, what, 25,000 since Keir Starmer became Prime Minister in small boats alone. And just in that alone, because let's not forget that there are people who overstay on visas. You've got all the problems with people coming over with the educational stuff.
Visas,
fake
student visas,
all this
but people
stuff.
bringing in dependents when they've come to do a master's.
There was
What
one
is
story
that?
of a great uncle being brought over as a dependent. You know, with his entire family, because this one guy was at university. It is ridiculous, and it is costing us money. And yet again, we go back to the point that we have older people freezing to
in the
death.
social care sector? Wasn't there a ratio for every social care sector worker who's been sort of imported from another country? And thank you for coming over and helping.
Yep.
But 10 dependents have come.
Yeah.
How is that even possible?
I know.
That just makes a mockery of the system.
It does.
Because those 10 dependents, are they all out there working as well in social? Well, no, because they're dependents.
Yeah, it makes a mockery of the system, and it is an insult to the people who pay into the system. Because what is the value? What is the kind of return on investment that you're getting when you invest it in this country and you pay your taxes? You are getting nothing back.
The pillage of Britain.
Yeah,
it's just.
I think that's a great
ridiculous.
phrase for it. The pillage of Britain, and that's what we're seeing.
Yeah. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we want to hear from you. So keep your calls and your messages coming in. 03444 499 1000 is the number to call. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp message or leave me a little voice note. We are 87222 if you want to text us. Write the word talk before your message. And on X, you can find us at talkTV. We're back after this.
Well, I think we've seen essentially what I call government by announcement over the last decade and actually longer in the UK and in Scotland. And rather than people sit down and think about what it is they want to achieve, where they want to get to, and then work out how to sell that message to the public, they start off by the message that they want to sell, and then everything else either follows or doesn't follow.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, hello there. Welcome back. Alex Phillips with you all week from 10 until 1, sitting in for Julia Hartley Brewer, who is away Monday to Thursday. And, of course, Friday is my own little time slot anyway. So great to have your company and great to have so many fantastic messages. Shall we have a seat to some calls now, Barnsley?
Yeah, definitely.
Let's do that. Let's speak to Val, who's in the Midlands. Hi, Val.
Hello, good morning. I've got a couple of points. I'm an employer, been running a business for 19 years. I can't get anybody to work part-time, school hours. So I'm downsizing my business. Plenty of work coming in, just can't get employees.
Why? What line of work are you in?
I run a domestic cleaning company and commercial.
Right.
And we've gone from having about 28 staff to having 4.
Why do you think that is? What's going on?
Nobody applies. Nobody applies. We've had staff leave after 15 years because they said they're better off on the dole.
That's a major problem, is that it is actually beneficial for most people to not go to work because of the amount of in-work benefits and the things that we give people. There is no incentive for a lot of people to actually bother entering the workforce. It's something that needs massive reform. It's something we don't talk about, and it is killing businesses like yours, Val. And you know, it's a huge problem that we face, and just nobody's talking about it because nobody wants to cut benefits. It's bad politics, it's bad headlines. Yeah. But actually, what you need to do is to cut to incentivise work. We've made work a bad word.
So this is it. I mean, we had figures out today, I think, saying that there were now 9 million economically inactive people. And I said earlier in the show, didn't I, when we talked about winter fuel allowance and pensioners, that people of that generation didn't have any choice but to work. They got on. My grandma, when she was alive, bless her, had about 3 jobs all at once just to feed her family. Simple jobs, you know, nothing glamorous, nothing big, as did many people in that post-war era as they were rebuilding this nation. And the thing is now, of course, is you cannot work, go and claim the dole, and it's, you know, enough money to get your food and whatever, and then you can just sit around and just watch back-to-back Netflix or, you know, everyone's got one of these as well, so you're sort of in constant company. It's too easy.
Yeah, definitely.
Whereas once upon a time, if you weren't working, you'd be bouncing off the walls of your house and there would be a social stigma attached to it. There'd be a sense of shame.
Yeah, I think that's a big factor in this, is the social stigma, because I really hate the phrase economically inactive, because what do you mean? There is a difference between somebody who physically cannot work and somebody who chooses not to work. And this kind of catch-all phrase is a way of kind of, you know, well, it's fine, you don't want to go to work or whatever. It removes that kind of, no, get off the sofa and go to work. Yeah. You know, and we need that back in this country because, unfortunately,
but also,
the
you know,
national
I
insurance
can't
hike
go
is
to
killing
work
it.
because of my mental health. I'm like, do you know what? Actually leaving the front door, going out, interacting with people, putting in a day's hard graft is a great thing for mental health. Work, in many respects, is dignity. Val, thank you ever so much for your call, my darling. Really appreciated your insights. Let's speak now to Robert, who is in Hertfordshire. Hi, Robert.
Hi, I was going to talk about the foreign aid, but listening to you there, I'd like to change it. I'm 72, but me and my wife, and we come. I consider that our generation built this country for where it was. You know, it was after the war. We come from the pleases and thank yous. Everybody, when I was at school in the mid-60s, nobody left the school without a job. Even if you wasn't academically bright, you had an apprenticeship. What we've got to be thanked for our tolls. Nobody's given me and my wife anything. We're comfortable. We paid for our own wedding in 1973. This is what we've got. We've had our eating allowances cut. My wife's a waspie. We've had our eyes being mucked about with, and I can't even use the phone. You know, if I phone the doctors, I've got to go online. I could just about turn my phone on. We're forgot about. We're the forgotten generation.
No, I agree, actually. I think that I think you're absolutely right about that. It's not just disrespect. It is a sort of flagrant lack of empathy. Yeah. It is, like I said, it's almost sociopathic, the way that the Labour Party seem to regard older people. Well, they don't vote for us. Oh, well, this. Oh, well, that. You know, well, they'll all be dead soon anyway. Yeah. I mean, as Robert's saying, it's his generation and the generation before him who did so much to build this country.
Yeah, and the generation after came along and wrecked it. That's what it was. And I go back to, I think this is linked to the prisons problem as well that we were talking about earlier, is that we've stopped, you just mentioned about the please and thank you kind of culture, we've stopped prosecuting and really going after the kind of smaller crimes, which then lead to a bigger, you know, kind of, it leads further down, because we've stopped kind of, you know, like setting kids right kind of mentality. Everything has spiraled out of control. And now we're dealing with the consequences of that. And, you know, I really feel for people of that generation, because I look after the Brexit vote, people legitimately wanted to remove older people's votes. That was a genuine conversation that was had in this country because they didn't vote the way they wanted. I just cannot believe.
But also with a sort of laugh and a smile, and you know, thinking they were the ones who were, you know, had moral rectitude. It just staggered me. It really did. That was Robert there in Hertfordshire. Here you go. Someone's measuring high. Alex, I'm 75 and voted Labour in the last election, thinking they couldn't be any worse than the previous incompetent Tory government. I think a lot of people did that. They didn't necessarily vote for Labour. They voted the Conservatives out.
Yes.
How wrong was I? I've got more respect for something I scrape off the bottom of my shoes than I've got for this useless Labour Party. That's Terry in Slough. P.S. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't it the Tory Party who started putting asylum seekers and illegal immigrants in hotels? Yes. Yep, it was.
100%.
Never forget what they did. I always say that because, you know, the Conservative Party was so good for so long. At every single time it was a new leader, a new election, a new manifesto, and we also, this time it's going to be proper right-wing. This time it's Conservative. I remember back in about sort of 2010-ish, or Angela Merkel and David Cameron both saying multiculturalism is going to be a disaster for Europe.
It was actually at the Munich Security Conference where he gave the muscular liberalism speech. They're exactly the point you're on about.
And they knew. Yeah. They knew, both of them knew it was going to be a disaster, and then they did nothing about it. And it comes back to is this deliberate? Or are they deranged? Are they deluded? The idea that, could they not?
And I go back to what Kemi said, actually, at the art conference, where she said it was weakness. It was weakness to actually follow through on the words, because they talked a good game, and when given the power and the opportunity, they didn't do anything.
Now, you know, we're talking about woke judges being woefully out of touch. The Gad Saad, who's a brilliant professor, would say this is suicidal empathy. Right, wait for this, breaking news. The Lady Chief Justice, now she is the head of the Judiciary for England and Wales, has said she is deeply troubled by an exchange at the latest PMQs between Sir Keir Starmer and Kemi Badenoch about an immigration tribunal decision. Deeply troubled about the two discussing that in Parliament, in sovereign Parliament, free speech Parliament.
Representatives of the people.
Oh, yeah. Apparently this was, and what do you know which one they were discussing?
Is it chicken nuggets?
No, it wasn't chicken nuggets.
Oh.
In fact, the discussion was about the family of 6 from Gaza who had successfully appealed to remain in the UK through a scheme intended for Ukrainian refugees. Now, what part of that debate has deeply troubled her? You know what that woman's basically implying? Oh, Lady Chief Justice. She's basically implying, all the poor Gazans, they must all be allowed to come here. How many of those poor Gazans have, you know, family members who are in Hamas? How many of those poor Gazans spat on the bodies of those girls as they were being taken hostage? Now, I am not saying that is all Gazans. Of course I am not. But if the system can be gamed, where women and children, and it was just women and children who came over from Ukraine, the men were forced to stay back and fight. A lot of those women and children have gone back now. But it was, you know, what one would consider proper refugees from war when Russia was bombarding it. Europeans, our neighbours, very similar culture to ours. And these things do matter, I'm afraid. They blimmin' well do matter. Now, if all of a sudden people from the Middle East can use that system to say they have right to remain here, and we end up taking a load of people from Gaza when the neighbouring countries aren't interested, they don't want them, the surrounding Muslim countries don't want them anywhere near, it will pose a national security threat. Now, that is just factual. Yeah. That is just pragmatic. Now, I'm afraid to say life isn't nice, right? I don't wish for any nice, decent, innocent person in Gaza to be living in the hellhole that it no doubt is. A rubberized, car-parked, horrible, dangerous, you know, squalid. I don't wish that on any innocent man, woman or child. Let us be clear. But you cannot turn around and go, well, that's it. Everyone from such and such a country riddled with terrorism can come over here, because you don't know if you've got the terrorist or not. And the thing is about, you know, Gaza is our kindness towards Gaza. Billions in human aid towards Gaza. It wasn't being used for schools and hospitals. No, it was building tunnels. It was buying weaponry. It was essentially funding and creating an entire subterraneous terrorist network from which they could launch the most horrific, inhumane attacks on their neighbour who they wish dead. Yeah. That is just the truth. And so, Lord, Lady, Chief Justice, what your name, what is wrong with this class of people? What is wrong with them?
There's another element to this, and this is, she doesn't like to be questioned. How dare you question the judiciary? That, if you notice, there's a lot of stories now of the judges and their decisions being brought into question around asylum, around public safety, you know, and for a long time it says, you can't question the courts, because the entire system will collapse. We're starting to see people say, well, wait a minute, what are you doing? And the Chief Justice has noticed now that this is a problem. Right. And she's trying to cut this out. I think this is politics at the end of the day, and I think this is a very problematic statement made by somebody who should know a lot better.
Yeah, unelected people who wield more power than the Prime Minister
100%.
And do not have the interest, can't vote them in, can't vote them out, and that is the thing that matters in a democracy. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but before that, do you want to know how you could win 25,000 squid? Here is how. Well, there isn't how at all, is it? I don't know what happened there. We're going to go to a break instead. So I think the tape got chewed up in the machine. I think it's because we had Tech Up working out all of this stuff, probably, and he's just, you know, he's sort of like forgot about that. Some mouse has eaten the videotape, who knows. But anyway, we are going to take a short break, and then after we come back from the break, when Tech Up's put the sort of, do you remember when people used to put the pencil in the...
wind it round,
reel
I'm
and
just
wind
about
it
old
round.
enough to remember
that. Once he's fiddled about with that during the break, we'll then tell you how you can win £25,000 after this. Hello there, welcome back. Let's now go back to a bit of geopolitics. We haven't discussed it so far today, amazingly. But of course, you all know the situation by now. There is a meeting going on between Marco Rubio and Sergei Lavrov over in Riyadh in Saudi. Those are sort of the respective counterparts, the sort of Secretary of State, Foreign Minister, beginning to open up a dialogue about whether there can be any sort of peace agreement between Ukraine and Russia. Now, all sorts of things have been squidged out to the press over the last few days. I would still reinforce that we do not know what that deal is going to look like yet, if it looks like anything right now, if it's even created any sort of form to it. There was a huge sort of hullabaloo over this idea that speaking to Vladimir Putin was elevating him to a sort of newfound non-pariah status, although you have to sort of say, the whole more Georgia or less war. If you're not going to sit down and speak to your enemy, you're never going to get anywhere. You're just going to end up with a perpetual war of attrition, which seems to me where we were at. But a lot of European leaders so concerned that they felt frozen out by this that they all got together yesterday, didn't they?
Yes,
they had an emergency crisis summit in Paris. And what happened? The same thing that's been going on for the past 3 years, which is Germany had a tantrum.
Oh, not just a tantrum. He threw the toys right out of the pram.
Oh, he did. He left the meeting early saying, this is all premature.
Apparently.
I'm disgusted by this. Now, let's remember when Russia went into Ukraine and Britain said, absolutely not. Right, how can we help? Weapons, all the rest of it. Germany? They still wanted Nord Stream 2.
Yeah, they were still buying oil from Russia at one point.
Still buying oil. They didn't want to put on sanctions. Many other European nations didn't want to do that. Even now they're preventing certain German weapons being used.
After the reaction of many European nations and their actions towards Russia, they're now demanding a seat at the table? Absolutely not.
Now, without sounding too controversial, I think this is the side effects of the EU and living in a German-dominated continent, because they've created so many problems, open borders, anyway. Let's speak now to Colonel Tim Collins, who's a former British Army officer. We were just talking there about Germany rejecting Starmer's Ukraine peace plan. I mean, for those of us who sort of watch geopolitics, and I've sat in the European Parliament, doesn't surprise me at all. Germany has always been rather hesitant, let's say, because they see, I think they think their foreign policy is somewhat divided between Russia and the West. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, actually, that Germany itself was divided between Russia and the West. But I think this is why America's lost patience with Europe, because there's been this absolute inability to make any sort of joined-up decision.
Yeah, well, I think we're seeing the end now of the international rules-based order, which we've all enjoyed, and it shades really of 20th century politics. The events, the unstoppable events that happened after Sarajevo brought about a change to Europe. The monarchies fell, republics rose. Things were very different within 4 years. And similarly, huge concessions were given to the Adolf Hitler at the Munich conference in the late 1930s, and as a result, he bought the time in order to invade Europe, invade Poland, and divide Poland up between himself and the Soviet Union. And again, there's shades of that. So what I'd say to your viewers is that look out the window, enjoy the sight. It's not going to be like this again for ever.
Blimey! I mean, in what sense? What do you think? What do you think lies on the horizon if essentially Vladimir Putin has gotten away with what he's done?
Well, I think the Russian ambition is undone. Remember, in the past, the threat from Russia was from the Soviet Union, not Russia itself, and that was a much bigger organization, including many Eastern European nations. Europe has let its military dwindle away to nothing. For us to become involved in anything, we'd have to stop doing something, which would mean withdrawing perhaps troops from the Baltic states in order to go to Ukraine. I mean, they can only be at one place at one time. America's focus was very much looking towards China, the new kid on the block, and that's a big concern for the Russians. Europe will be left to its own devices. Europe is, as we know, probably incapable of defending itself against a resurgent Russia. And Russia, given 2 to 3 years to rearm, re-equip, learn the lessons of this, and then find new allies, I don't think we'd be in a position to stop them. People say, well, of course, the European nations are much larger, more numerous, they've got more money. Yeah, but they don't have the population has not got the stomach to defend what it has. And indeed, many young men across Europe might be attracted to what Putin is offering. by Reeves finding themselves within a Putin vision. People who used to live in East Germany, who used to live in the Soviet-dominated Europe, may think back to the days when they could walk out at night in total safety, even if it was under a Soviet regime. Now they cannot, and they might hanker for those days.
Wow, incredible. I mean, are you sort of suggesting that Putin would have the audacity to invade a NATO country, to attack and invade a NATO country?
Well, he can break them off one at a time, and he's saying that. Putin's view is almost certainly that the Baltic states belong to him. He certainly thinks the Ukraine belong to them. He has to weigh up: is Europe a threat? Answer: no. Is NATO a threat? With the United States inside, yes. If NATO doesn't have the guarantee from the United States, then no. Do we have enough time to rearm? Partially, but we'd have to do massive defence spending right across the board. And countries like the UK would have to start spending 4% of its GDP. Countries that spend, like Spain spends 1.25%. The Republic of Ireland spends 0.25% of its. So they live in a world that this could never happen to me. And such a word existed in what we call the Belle Epoque in Europe. In 1914, and that was blown away by the industrial might of a world war.
Well, this is it. History does have a really bad habit of repeating itself, and we've seen 2 world wars now happening on the continent of Europe. Again, I think because of this sort of wishy-washy approach to defence, because there isn't enough harmony and unity, and every single time we've sort of, gone in there because they're our near neighbours. And you sort of think in this circumstance, if there was an encroachment into Estonia or Lithuania or Latvia or a little bit of Poland or something like that. I mean, Poland would probably get stuck in there. But the other European countries would do this. They'd have an emergency summit. Germany would throw its toys out the pram, and the only country who'd want to get in there and try and sort things out would be the UK by itself. We just don't have the resources to do it. A lot of the conversation has been around whether or not we should be putting boots on the ground in, let's say, some sort of future demilitarized zone between Russia and Ukraine. I've heard various opinions on this. One side of the story is we've got to do this, and it's the best way to make sure that we can hold Russia at bay as long as there's an American backstop. Also, it gives our armed forces the opportunity to retrain, to learn skills that Ukrainian fighters have been on the front line, have developed, whether it be drone technology. But then the other school of thought is actually, how dare these politicians sit there and say, we want to send your working class sons and daughters out to a hellhole where they might end up in face-to-face combat while you sit in your ivory towers. Where do you come down on that?
Well, you can certainly put boots on the ground. We could put hundreds of thousands of boots on the ground. The problem is there'd be no one in the boots, because no one wants to join the army. The message that's come clearly through the BBC and the like is that this country isn't worth defending. So people aren't joining the military. So where are those people going to come from? That would be my question.
Well, I think it's a very good point entirely. Now, let's talk about where American policy might be going on this, because I find it very difficult to read. I don't think that Donald Trump is the sort of man who's just going to instantly appease Putin. I don't think that makes him look good on the international stage. I don't think anything about Donald Trump's ego suggests that, handshaking with Putin says peace on earth, and you can keep all of the territory that you've got, and we're also now going to invite you to the G7, particularly if he's concerned about China, and they're all part of the same anti-Western axis. I just don't think that rings entirely true. Yet we don't know what's going to be in that deal. What would your suspicions be? Do you think America, at the very least, are going to be ready to provide a backstop?
I think the Americans are. President Trump is a businessman at the end of the day. He's a showman for sure, but he's a businessman. So depending on what he gets in Ukraine will be the point at which he will turn around to the Ukrainians and probably guarantee them security, but it'll come at a high price, and he'll expect a lot in return. And as the European great nations stand around with their fingers in their mouths looking on, he will turn to them and say, we will also help you and the bases in Fairford, and you will pay for them. The troops we have in America, the American troops we have in Europe, you will pay for them. You will pay everything for them. If you want them there, that's what it will cost you. That will be the result, I suspect.
Colonel Tim Collins, former British Army officer, thank you so much for your insights. Good old Fairford. I go to the air show there every year. That won't happen anymore, will it?
God, no.
Shame. Favourite date in the calendar. But your thoughts on this? Where do you stand on the UK troops in a demilitarised zone as a sort of ethical position?
Far too little, far too late. Far too little, and I'm not a big fan of this. What is looking very much like an appeasement to Putin, but the way that Trump is doing it is like, look, Europe messed up here.
Yeah, it was inevitable.
Yeah, after about 40, 50 years of the US funding European security, what did they think was going to happen? I go back to a speech that Pete Hesketh made, the new defence secretary in the US, saying that Europe has made Uncle Sam Uncle Sucker. In other words, there's no more free money anymore. You've got to stand on your own 2 feet. And there is nothing wrong in Trump saying that. And I do think it is about time Europe stood up and started to defend itself. He's right that we've lived in this world of kind of, everybody can hold hands and sing Kumbaya. Unfortunately, that is not the real world.
It's a continent of 500 million people. If you add up the populations of the European nations in NATO, it's a bit over 500 million, whereas in America that's 300 million. And you're saying that we can't spend even a fraction of what they're spending. And I just remember, the EU is still hell-bent on creating an EU army, PESCO, the Defence and Security Pact. And during Brexit, we all warned this is a really bad idea. It will undermine NATO. NATO undermines itself. But if this came in and the EU was making foreign policy decisions, forget it.
People keep saying Trump is the greatest threat to NATO. No, it's not. European leaders are.
European leaders are.
Yeah, you want to make the world. It is absolutely ridiculous. But one thing I will just say really, really quickly is Putin doesn't have to invade another NATO member. He just has to disrupt it. He has to just destabilise it. That is what they do. This invasion is a rarity. Look at what's happened in Moldova. Look at Georgia. That is the point. That is what Russia will do. It's
and all
not
across
invasion.
Africa, they destabilise regimes. And I said it yesterday, actually. There's a top academic out there who has sort of said, if you look at what's going on in the United Kingdom, add that element of extra disruption, and what we could end up is mass civil unrest, basically, across Europe. We're on the brink. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, this goes from bad to worse.
Oh, it's awful.
We're now going to be discussing farming, because ministers are going to be telling farmers that the inheritance tax plan is fair. And there's just been a big press conference by the NFU, the National Farmers Union. I had to call them out. I saw them talking about things such as food production and food security. Well, if we do end up in mass disruption and Russia playing games with us, and we're not producing enough food to feed the country at the moment, at least 40% of our food is imported. Welcome back, ration books, and dig for victory. We're discussing that after this.
Well, I think we've seen essentially what I call government announcement. Decade and actually longer in UK and rather than people sit down and think about what
across the UK on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello there, welcome back to the show. Right, we're going to just jump straight into it and welcome to the show farm and agri-tech entrepreneur James Wright, who's in Exmoor. Hi James, how are you doing?
Very well, thank you.
They are digging their heels in, aren't they, the Labour government, over farmers' inheritance tax. They're trying to make out to us that this isn't that impactful. Not many people are going to be affected by it, which makes me ask the question, why are you then pushing ahead with it? You could afford to just scrap it if you wanted to. And not only this, not only is the inheritance tax potentially going to impact loads and loads of farms, different numbers coming from the Treasury to DEFRA to the NFU themselves, but they desperately want farmers to rewild, to turn over land to solar farms. Unless you can stick one of those silicon panels between two bits of bread and eat it, I don't think this is a good idea.
Well, you're not alone. I mean, the majority of the public back farmers in their battle with the Labour government, and Labour simply have not done their sums right. They are saying that it's going to generate £520 million a year, only affect 500 farms a year. But as you say, the National Farmers Union, the Countryside Landowners Association are saying it's going to affect many more. But let's say it didn't. Let's say it only affected 500 farms a year. Those are the largest farms. Those are the ones that are producing the most food. So when we talk about food security, they're the ones that are going to be hurt the most.
But this isn't about wealthy people. This isn't farmers sitting there driving Rolls Royces with millions of pounds in the bank just to lob at HMRC to pay for migrants. This is essentially having to just sell off chunks of farmland in order to be sustained, in order to be able to keep the farm running in the next generation. And this is how much land might we lose? Because this is the thing. You add to it, the sort of push now for rewilding and not producing food, and there seems to be this really weird, perverse focus instead on giving money and aid to farming overseas and actually depleting our ability to feed ourselves. I think is it 60% right now of the food we eat we actually make ourselves in Britain. That was the same amount at the outbreak of World War II. We know we live in an unstable world. You want to know what your enemies are planning? You look at what they're doing. China, on the other hand, has decided it's going to go hell for leather, a big push on agriculture to make sure they can produce 100% of the food they eat, because they say we live in unstable, troubled times. Well, wake up, Sir Keir Starmer, I say.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, food security is national security. A population that can't feed itself is no population at all. And there is lots of pressure on UK farmland. It's not just from energy production and rewilding. It's from home building as well. We need new homes, so that's good. But there's a lot of pressure coming down the track, and the family farm tax, the simple matter of the fact is farmers can't afford to pay it. We already pay a lot of tax, income tax, VAT, all sorts. But the family farm tax, in my lifetime, we rent our farm, but we own a small bit. But the bit that we rent, in my lifetime, the amount of rent that we pay is less than the inheritance tax liability my landlord will have to pay when he dies. So why should he rent it to me? He'd be better off selling it to a foreign company or something like that, because farming is not profitable enough to pay the inheritance tax, and it's just going to degrade our food security, which degrades our national security. And China, they're thinking of a 100-year strategy, and on the software that we produce, we've been speaking to people in China who want to improve their productivity on their farms, because they're thinking in decades, they're thinking about that investment, but we're not, and it's bizarre.
No, and this is the thing. And I have no doubt that China would love to see us get rid of half our farming. We're a blimmin' island. It doesn't take much to disrupt food supply chains. If things have to cross via boat and via aeroplane, it's very easy to disrupt those supply chains. We've seen it already with the Houthi rebels. We saw it when that Gertz cargo ship got stuck in the canal. Do you remember that thing? Yeah. That was weird. But it doesn't take much as an island to cut us off, and that leads to mass instability, food prices going up. But at the same time, I think there's also biosecurity to take into consideration here, because the way we farm and the rules that govern our farming are very different from rules in other countries. We tend to have less, correct me if I'm wrong, of the sort of mass indoor rearing, the industrialised farming, a lot more of pastoral outdoor farming, which I think probably produces better, safer meat, especially in dairy. And I worry if we're suddenly going, right, we're going to go for the cheapest food from whichever country, not only might the supply chain be disrupted, but I worry about the standards of safety as well.
Well, we are in this band around the world that means we have a wonderful climate where we can grow crops without lots of inputs, and we should take advantage of that. There are parts of the world where they can't produce food, so any food that we're importing here, we could probably produce more efficiently here, but we've got this perverse structure that encourages farmers not to. And we've got some of the world's best standards. And the other thing to say is to those that don't like Brexit, the beef price and the lamb price right now, and milk, is almost the highest it's ever been. And that's because we're no longer importing lots of meat from other countries. We're eating the stuff that's produced here. And actually, when we make an investment, when the supply chains have to change, it's actually really good for British farmers. I mean, this year should be a bumper year for British farming, and instead we're going to spend the year worrying about our future. A cow born on my farm this month, we're just about to start calving. If she's a heifer, it will take 2 years for her to have her first calf, and it'll take another 18 months before I can sell that calf. That is a 3.5-year investment before I get any money back. And there'll be farmers up and down the country right now making a choice about whether or not they sell that animal in the autumn or keep it to become a productive animal. And it's just our food security, which will just degrade and degrade. We've got to give farmers the confidence to be able to invest.
Couldn't agree more. It's been brilliant talking to you, James Wright, farm and agri-tech entrepreneur there. I mean, I just feel with Sir Keir Starmer, sometimes you just think, is he actually actively trying to end the United Kingdom? The decisions are so dangerous and so ridiculous, whether it's the race for net zero, whether it's saying no more oil and gas, whether it's making sure we can't feed ourselves. It's like he actually wants to make sure that what he achieves in the next 5 years is blackouts and ration books.
Yeah, I think I go back to what you was just saying, that it's that thing with China, is that they're thinking in terms of decades, we think in terms of minutes. That's the difference. That is the stark difference, and it's why we are in such a mess. The reason Keir Starmer is doing most of this, I think, is because it's ideologically driven. He doesn't like farmers because farmers are rich, in his mind view, because he's never probably been to a farm.
Oh, no, but have you heard the toolmaker's son? Didn't he grow up working on a farm?
Oh, I know.
He's got a CV like Rachel Reeves, doesn't he?
I love that little bit of nonsense, but this is really supporting, because he's bang on. Food security is national security. We're about to enter a very volatile geopolitical age, and we need as much security and as much firmness in those basic supply chains and being able to produce our own. And Keir Starmer and the British government is failing that. This is very dangerous stuff.
Very dangerous. I'll tell you what, he did probably work on a farm when he went to that workers' camp behind the Iron Curtain with the USSR spies. That's probably where he was on some sort of collective milking cows for the Soviet Union. Right, here you go. Guess what? Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan, London Mayor, is going to be telling EU diplomats Brexit was a mistake and argue for stronger EU ties. Just get lost.
Yeah, pretty much.
Get lost. How dare he do this? He has banged that drum continuously. You have no right. You're the Mayor of London. You're not the blimmin' Prime Minister. Get back to your ridiculous woke little building on the River Thames. Figure out how to make London transport work. Perhaps figure out how to stop people stabbing each other in broad daylight and looting the high streets. Perhaps figure out how you get rid of all of the vape shops and the Turkish barbers and the American candy stores, which are money laundering units. Perhaps, my friend, you might want to figure out how London stops declining into a developing world hellhole before you decide that Britain should be rejoining the EU, you anti-democratic little twerp. Oh, my eyes were blinking with fury then. I can't get over this, man. And I tell you what he wants. I'll tell you what he wants. He wants that EU youth mobility scheme where under 30s from the bloc can come and live, work and study in the UK. I'll tell you which under 30s want a free passport over to the UK. People that Germany don't want. People that Spain don't want.
Irregular
people that
migrants.
France don't want. Yes. The young men who they'll have just flagged through and go, here you go, here's a residency.
Yeah, freedom of movement.
Oh, thanks, we'll go to Britain now.
Yep. This man. What's quite interesting for looking at this in a kind of political sense is that it shows that Keir Starmer has no control over the Labour Party. Let's be real. This is about a war between Number 10 and the City Hall.
Proper Napoleon syndrome, doesn't he? He wants control over everything.
Yeah,
he loves the grandstanding, that little pipsqueak of a bozo.
God. The sooner that man is out of British politics, the better this country will be. Not just for London, but the entire country.
I'm amazed. Like, do you know what? If people who actually were right-wing decided to vote in the London elections, we wouldn't be stuck with that little twerp.
Well, unfortunately, he's making it so that right-wingers just don't want to live here.
Look out the window. It's nasty out there. Oh, gosh, and I have to live here. Right, OK, going to take a short break now, but don't you worry, there is still an hour more common sense and diatribes coming your way just after this. Put the kettle on and I'll see you in a moment.
Across the UK on DAB Plus on your smart.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Honestly, if you had like a little fly-on-the-wall camera to see what goes on in these studios during advert breaks, you think we just sit there, have a polite conversation.
Yeah,
no.
if only.
No, I was there demanding that Ted create some sort of hot plate setup,
situation.
Because I get wonderful cups of tea delivered to me, but when you're talking all the time, you don't get to drink them. So I need some sort of little setup that it can just stay warm. Maybe it's a good old-fashioned teapot.
Yeah, I'd thought that with a tea cozy, you get talk written on the side of it.
Yeah, if you're a keen knitter and you fancy making a talk tea cozy, I'll make sure that I get a talk teapot to go with it.
Yeah.
That'd be cool. I would like that. I'd pop a little tea service. And
do you know, I just one thing
that'd be so me.
A tea from a teapot is just superior in every way. If you make it in a cup, fine, but if you make it in a teapot, we're friends.
What's the milk rule about this as well? Because I heard that because I put my milk in second because I'm normal, you know. But apparently when you pour it from a pot, you put the milk in first.
Yeah, that's because when we had china cups, if they're hot water, it stops the cup from breaking.
But you kind of scowled at me when I said I'm milk in second.
But that's if you're making it in a cup, you put it in second. But if you're making it first, don't put the milk in first. Yeah, there's a whole it's a northern thing.
It's a very British conversation. It's very British. Right now, let's have another very British conversation, which is how much we hate woke ideology. There is a big conference going on right now at the Excel Centre in London, the ARC ARC conference, and it's basically a gathering of the leading minds, let's say, from right-wingery, from around the world, really, but largely America, a bit of Canada in there, and the UK. It's called the Alliance for Responsible Citizenship Conference, and it brings together sensible-minded people from around the world, and they have speeches and they have panels. It's a bit like a sort of CPAC without the actual politics part of it. It's sort of like a Glastonbury of...
Yeah, it is.
Free speech.
Yeah.
And the Conservative Party leader, Kemi Badenoch, was speaking there yesterday, and she came out swinging, didn't she?
She did.
Declaring war on poisonous woke ideology, the left's useful idiots. And she warned the fabric of Western civilization must be defended before it's lost. Now, that actually echoes very much the speech that J.D. Vance made over at the Munich Security Conference when he pointed his finger, making that poor soul Christoph Husken, whatever he's called, the director of the Munich Security Conference, who was former foreign affairs advisor to Merkel. Well done, slow round of applause to you. He burst into tears. He needed a team cuddle. Because Vance said, you guys are the problem. Well, let's speak now to Toby Young from the Free Speech Union. I'm pretty sure when it comes to some of the things J.D. Vance was saying and some of the things Kemi Badenoch has been saying, you probably 100% concur.
That's right, yes. I thought Kemi's speech was excellent. I really like the fact that she said, we all know what Western values are. We all know why they need to be defended. We don't have to come up with new, better reasons to defend them. We just have to be more confident about defending them. It's a crisis of confidence. It's not because we don't know what we believe. It's because we've become inhibited about telling people what we believe and standing up for our beliefs. I thought that was a good, strong message. And unlike when J.D. Vance made his speech at the Munich Security Conference, I don't think anyone in the audience here burst into tears after Kemi's speech.
I mean, one of the sort of main themes being discussed at the ARC conference so far is day 2 there. Lots of people from around the world gathering to discuss about these big themes. I'd imagine free speech is the rich theme running through the lot of it.
Yes, there's been a lot about free speech. Jordan Peterson mentioned how important free speech is when he opened the conference yesterday morning. There's a kind of Christian dimension to it, which is interesting. Many of the speakers on the main stage are Christians. We had the Speaker of the House of Representatives. He's a staunch Christian. He gave one of the opening speeches yesterday. I think one of the big questions for me is, can we defend the values that we want to defend, like free speech, without rooting them in a Christian religious framework? Is there a secular humanist, non-religious way we can defend those values? I think there is, but that's one of the big talking points at ARC this year.
Yeah, do you know, that's really fascinating, because something that has happened on the right wing, not just in America, where it's definitely very present, but in Germany, in France, in Italy. I remember before she became president of Italy, Giorgia Meloni Prime Minister of Italy, sorry, Giorgia Meloni essentially saying that I am a Christian, and there does seem to be this resurgence of cultural Christianity, this desire to get back perhaps what has been corroded and what has been lost, which used to underpin those values that have been so important to the progress of the Western world.
Yes, I mean, I think there's that's definitely one of the themes of ARC, that the values we all care about and want to defend are rooted in the Judeo-Christian tradition, and we cast that aside at our peril. And outside that framework, the values that have grown up within that framework need defending, because otherwise they'll wither and die. For a while they were able to defend themselves, but now they need robust defending. And there are plenty of good people here making the case very persuasively for the values that we want to defend.
Now, talking about robust defending, that is something that you, after setting up the Free Speech Union, have done so brilliantly. I can remember when it was first established thinking, that's an interesting idea. Did you expect to be as busy as you are? And also, how do we now deal with this, the apparatus of now how to create this sort of free speech revolution in society? Because we've just seen recently the Lady Chief Justice getting upset and, you know, crying crocodile tears over an exchange on the floor of Parliament about whether Gazans should be allowed to use the Ukrainian scheme. It seems to me, yet again, this is a judge trying to get rid of free speech and actually going after the one place that is supposed to be the bastion of free speech. What do we do structurally to try and prevent these mechanisms of state, which have clearly become so bloated and so woke and so out of control? How do we reel that back in?
Well, the Free Speech Union, which is now 5 years old, has had most of its successes in the courts. So appealing to the law is nearly always the most effective way to defend free speech. You're right, there's an awful lot of overreach, and the people doing the overreaching are often state actors, and they believe the law is on their side. But actually, the law is more liberal and has more protections built in for free speech than they often imagine. So when someone is fired for exercising their right to lawful free speech in the workplace, often we can get compensation for them in the employment tribunal because their beliefs are actually protected, funnily enough, under the Equality Act. So the belief in the biological reality of sex, for instance, and 40% of the cases we've taken on, and we've taken on over 3,300 over the last 5 years, 40% have been women who've got into trouble for expressing their belief in the biological reality of sex. And that is now a protected belief, thanks to the work of Maya Forstater, who took her employer to the employment tribunal when she was sacked for expressing her gender-critical beliefs. That's now a protected belief, so we can often appeal to the Equality Act to defend women who lose their jobs as a result of saying, no, I don't want to share toilets with a biological male. I don't think women should have to compete against biological men in sport. They often get into awful trouble. But as I say, over 1,000 of our cases over the last 5 years have been women in precisely that situation. And nearly always, in nearly every case, we've been successful by appealing to the law. The law actually protects gender-critical beliefs, which often comes as a surprise to overreaching authoritarian employers.
So perhaps instead of throwing out the baby with the bathwater and looking at abolishing great swathes of our legal canon, would we be best advised to make sure that resourcing is applied sensibly? Because it seems to me that for the average Brit who gets persecuted at the altar of hate crime and all the rest of it, they have very limited access to legal aid or any sort of resource to be able to pay for a good solicitor, whereas those people who frankly should, in my opinion, not be entitled to automatic legal representation are being able to enjoy second, third, fourth, even fifth appeals on things like their immigration status.
Yeah, I think there's definitely an inequality of access to legal help, and if you are if you're a favoured cause from the Liberal Left's point of view, it's often easier to secure legal representation than if you're identified with an unfashionable cause. But that's where the Free Speech Union comes in. So, for instance, I think many of the people who ended up in prison, not as a result of participating in the riots following the Southport murders, but for just expressing how they felt about those murders online. Many of them were prosecuted, advised by overworked duty solicitors to plead guilty, pled guilty, ended up in prison. I think if they'd have had better legal representation, many of them, and had pleaded not guilty, they wouldn't have ended up going to prison. They would have been acquitted by juries. And the reason I say that is because we know of at least 6 people who were charged with various criminal offences for things they said on social media about the Southport murders. 6 people who pleaded not guilty, and 5 of them have been acquitted, including perhaps most famously Jamie Michael, ex-Royal Marine, who was charged with stirring up hatred because of a video he posted on Facebook, charged at the behest, incidentally, of a Labour councillor who worked for a member of the Welsh Parliament, a Labour member of the Welsh Parliament, charged, prosecuted. We got him a really good solicitor, a really good barrister, and it took a jury all of 17 minutes to unanimously find him not guilty. And to my mind, that suggests that if many of the people currently languishing in jail for hurty words on Facebook, for posting memes on Twitter, that they wouldn't now be in jail if they'd have pled not guilty and had better legal advice. So it's absolutely essential that people who do find themselves getting their collars felt, charged for hurty words on social media, reach out to the Free Speech Union, because we can help. Become a member and we can help you. And if anyone watching this or listening to this would like to become a member, is worried about getting into trouble for something they've said on social media, go to www.freespeechunion.org/join. Only costs 60 quid a year, 30 quid if you're on benefits or you're a veteran or you're a pensioner. It'll be the best money you've ever spent.
Amazing. Toby, I cannot tell you how vital the work that you and the Free Speech Union do. I can't believe that 1,000 cases in 5 years, women alone. Incredible work. Toby Young, thank you ever so much. Enjoy the rest of the art conference. Make the most of it. I think we're way too supine in this country, because listening to what Toby said, and I've said this myself, and I'm not a legal expert, but he knows about this because they've been doing this for 5 years. They've defended people who've gotten off on these charges. And I said for a long time, it stinks, the fact that there are people there that, first of all, did Sir Keir Starmer prejudice them when he turned around and said far-right rioters. Their tweets caused riots. That to me is sort of the Prime Minister saying it to the media. If that doesn't prejudice the outcome of a decision in court, what does? And then you've got the CPS, the Crown Prosecution Service, which of course he used to run. Knows it well. Which is an apparatus of state. It is a state's device, telling people, rather than go out there and defend yourself, plead guilty. Then on top of this, there's that weird little arrangement where these people had all their trials televised. It is dark.
It's dark, but I would remind people that Keir Starmer has a rep on this. Let's not forget the Nightingale Court when there was the Manchester riots and the previous London riots as well. You know, his ability to kind of use the apparatus of the state and the legal side of it is well documented. So it doesn't really surprise me, but at the ARC conference, one thing that is consistently being talked about, because I was there the other day, was this kind of enemy from within. It's kind of, there's an enemy out there, and the fifth column activists. So, Kemi talked about it, the useful idiots, and these people that are consistently undermining the very foundations of Western civilization, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And I think it's about time we got to grips with that. And saying that, Lord Young was right, saying that when Kemi mentions about, we know what we're defending, we don't need to justify it again and again and again. We actually just have to do it. And I think this is the big thing, that a lot of people talk a good game on this stuff, but they seem to be missing from the fight when it's getting a little,
well, this is the double whammy on all of this. Those really chilling televised trials, throwing people into prison with really ridiculously long sentences, without any sort of trial to speak of. I was saying I think we're a bit too supine. A lot of other nations, if they had this sort of level of heavy-handed law enforcement, would be up in arms about it. Yet the chilling effect is people are now afraid to protest or speak out about it. It's had the sort of double impact of terrifying people.
Yeah, it's almost like that was deliberate.
It's almost like this was deliberate. It's no, it does. It is harrowing, frankly, what went on, lest we forget, I say. OK, we're going to take a short break now, but when I come back, we want to hear from you. 03444 99 1000 is the number to call if you'd like to let me know your thoughts. Free speech here. This is the home of exactly that. You can use that number to send me a WhatsApp or leave me a free speech voice note. 87222 is the number to text. Right, talk before your message. That way we get it right here. Or we're on X at talkTV. Back after this.
There's a general consensus across the architect and it's been there for over 5 years, going back before COVID. So, consultation is beyond me. I mean, I can be cynical. Tend to when you want to be doing something and actually doing.
That's was my worry. Kind of confirmed it for me. That the railway
AB Plus.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Right, without much further ado, welcome aboard HMS Doge, the common sense ship sailing the high seas here on Talk. Let's speak now to David, who's in Stirling in Scotland. Hi, David.
Hi there.
Hi, what do you want to talk about?
I was wanting to make a comment about the farming situation, if that's possible.
Yeah, go ahead.
Right, well, I'm a farmer and I'm a kind of logical thinker, try to think things through clearly, and I just wanted to tell the viewers what I think is going to happen. I think there's been various demonstrations by farmers. I think there's another one coming up on the 4th of March. But ultimately, once we get our act together, what farmers will do is they will withhold their produce. And what I mean by that is they'll put the milk down the drain, they will not move any cattle or sheep, they won't let grain go to breweries, these kind of things. They'll just stop the supply. And I think it'll take less than a week to bring the country to a standstill. And I think Keir Starmer thinks that this is going to go away and the folk are just going to forget about it. But I can assure you that the farming fraternity, they realise how serious this is. There is a definite food shortage coming down the line. Even before the inheritance tax, there is a definite food shortage coming. We can see that. I'm a farmer in Scotland and we produce cattle and sheep, and the price is through the roof because of supply and demand. Now, it's good that the prices are up, but from the general public going to buy the produce point of view, if you think the prices are dearer now, you haven't seen anything yet, and I'm not joking. There is a massive exodus of people out of farming because of house building, solar panels, renewable energy, rewilding. We're actually luckier up here in Scotland. The Scottish Government, they have got a lot of faults, but quite a lot of them are rural MSPs, and they do understand how a rural economy works. But in England, I would say they're absolutely screwed. And honestly, people are not going to be able to buy food, and it's going to be soon. They think you go to a supermarket and the shelves are full. There is such a short supply chain in the food industry. If farmers decided tomorrow, right, we're not going to let any grain move, there'd be no beer brewed before the end of the week. And you can I see how quick that kind of catches up with the folk in the cities.
No,
so,
I can't. Do you know, that's really interesting.
Do not underestimate the farming fraternity, because if we get it right, the NFU are actually too weak. They should just go for, I don't want to call it a strike, I would say that we could lawfully withhold their produce. Wow. Farmers don't want to be down in London protesting and getting arrested. They don't want to be doing that. But we can just say, this week, as of next Monday, nothing's moving. We can pour the milk down the drain, and honestly, it would bite quick.
Yeah, it really would, David. That is a really interesting insight. You know, when you think about it, I was imagining it in my head. I can see how plausible it would be as a device to try and make the government wake up.
Yeah.
But you know, if we came to that point, Peter, I mean, a couple of things that I can already see happening. One is we've got a very intransigent government.
Oh, massively.
So it would have
more
to become...
More so than any other we've ever
It'd have to become a real crisis before something would happen. Now, the way it escalates into a real crisis, I know exactly what happened in London if food started, there were shortages on the street. The looting.
Oh, without a doubt.
It would become feral.
Yeah.
It would kick off in a big way. I mean, it looks like it's been looted most of the time on my street anyway. People just nicking stuff, usually to sell to foreign gangs. But the looting, it would become sort of civil, and it would become criminal.
Yeah, What was it once called? The London was once a criminal's paradise, and I think we would return to that. I really do.
And then, not that I want that part to happen, but if that became the case, would Sir Keir Starmer then go, OK, emergency general election? That is the question.
No, he would never do that, because what he would do, and I think this is the more likely thing, he would start calling farmers far-right fascists. He would start to demonise them. We're already starting to see it with the useful idiots, with the you know, the gilets and the barber jackets being symbols of right-wing fascism. Was a legitimate argument in an article in The Guardian when they started. You know, this stuff is already being planted to make farmers the bad guys. And that is what he'll do. He'll paint farmers as they're the ones that are doing this, not him. He's just trying to, you know, make it fair for society. Right. That's what we're already seeing, that being put into place. The most dangerous thing about people like Rachel Reeves, Ed Miliband and Keir Starmer, they will never admit they got it wrong.
Oh, gosh.
That is the most dangerous thing. So the U-turns aren't a thing for them.
The Leninist revolution in Russia, where they love all those communists, don't they? They were happy with people just starving and eating each other.
But there's
mass cannibalism in Russia.
There's one other thing David said that I thought was fascinating, where he talked about the MSPs knowing rural economies and England not. This is really telling. London is run by Whitehall. They've never stepped foot out of the out of the M25, let alone been to a farm.
Do we have to go back to our Doge list and start saving the devolved governments now?
Yeah, unfortunately, we might have to, because these people do know how to run farms.
You get rid of the devolved governments and you just make sure that the House of Lords, especially, is staffed with people who actually come from professional backgrounds like that.
Definitely agree.
David, thank you so much for your call. Really interesting, that. Let's quickly speak now to Tony, who's in Suffolk. Hi, Tony.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, what do you want to talk about?
Well, I'm just listening to your research, really. I'm a new listener to your station, which I'm really enjoying. But, you know,
welcome.
I'm a 60-year-old male heading towards retirement, and I've just seen the country that I love go to the dogs over the last 20 years. You know, we're full to the brim of legal immigrants. There's nowhere to house them. There's nowhere for my son to rent a flat that he wants, because every time he wants to rent a flat, there's a list of 10 or 12 people ahead of him.
Yeah.
You know, the whole place, the whole country has just gone to the dogs. It's such a shame. We were once a great nation.
At one point, we used to say that, you know, the West was in managed decline. It's now in accelerated decline. No, it is. It's
rapid acceleration.
It's turbocharged. And this is what I find so alarming, which is it was bad anyway. The managed decline was the Conservative Party to some degree. There was a lot more they could have done. I mean, heck, especially when it comes to controlling borders. The way that Boris Johnson especially signed off on net zero and open door immigration, that ain't right-wing, my friend. No. But now, with this lot, like I said, it seems like they actually want to destroy Britain. They're trying to mess with our food security.
We're going to hell in a handcart.
Right.
We really are.
And so I'm going to ask you something, Tony, here.
Far away.
Which is, you know, one of the conversations I've been having the last couple of days is, when it comes to this political elite, are they deluded or is this deliberate?
They're deluded. I don't know. They haven't got a clue what they're doing. I mean, the Conservatives made a big mess of the country, and you know, I don't think that Keir Starmer and his party brigade are going to do anything any better. The election was won on an open door. All they had to do was push it open to win it, because people were so fed up with Conservatives. And I think maybe you're right. Maybe it's deliberate. Maybe they're just trying to run this great country into the floor.
Sometimes it feels that way. It really does feel that way. Tony, thank you. Welcome aboard. to the little club of common sense we have here at Talk. It's lovely to have you, Tony, and do continue to tune in because there's all sorts of brilliant commentators, presenters and content on this here channel. We're basically the best channel. I don't want you to go anywhere else where you can get this wholesome goodness.
Just on what Tony was saying then, the one thing I think which makes Keir Starmer's party different is the acceptance of managed decline. They said that's it. There's no point in even trying.
I think that's what it is. I don't
think it's a deliberate that they want to push they've just said, well, this is going to happen. Let it happen. You know, there is no fight anymore in our political class, or in many, even in the corporate world, I think it's the same. Do you know what? Let's try and turn this boat around. There is no push anymore to try and make Britain a better place. There's a good talking game, but when it comes to actually doing it, we are nowhere to be seen. You know, and I think that's what it is. It is acceptance now. Do you know, like you go through the 5 stages of grief? I think we're now at stage 5. And
yeah.
Then, you know,
I think there's something to that. I think what they've done, especially when it comes to the open borders thing, is that they've created such a mess of it all. Now it's like, okay, we can't undo that without radical plans, which they're not willing to put in place. And so instead, we're just going to have to manage the fallout. And I think that is a reality. Let's have some voice notes before we go to break. Here's Christopher.
Hi, Alex. Hi, Peter. Chris from Epsom. I'm loving the Doge. Listen, this is what I would do. Our house needs a clear out.
Right.
Everybody landing illegally goes to a detention camp. And they're held in a detention camp until we can actually prove who they are, because they're destroying their paperwork before they arrive, which is why they can't be processed and there's a backlog. And listen, we have over 1 million overstayers. That's the educational visas and visitors visas, and they just haven't left. We keep no track of them. It's time to have a clear out and get rid of the lot of them.
Couldn't agree more.
Bit of Doge on that.
Yeah, the paperwork one is a really good point, because the Conservatives brought in the kind of law and rule that if you did destroy your paperwork, your asylum claim wasn't even heard.
Hi, Alex.
Sorry. I was going to say the Labour Party scrapped that as soon as they got into office. That was a big one that they did, and it kind of shows their mentality. But yeah,
that was weird. There's like a ghost. I don't know if it came out on the radio. It's just a ghost in my ear. There's like a "Hi, Alex," and I'm like, "What?" Yeah, you
I got that as well.
Did they come out from that cupboard I kicked underneath the desk? Is that like some sort of crawl space where there's someone who's either like they could be Australian, like tunnelling up from Queensland or something, or is it potentially a sneak preview of our next voice note? We're about to find out, because this is Rob.
Hi, Alex.
That's
the question I would ask about all this government waste, or perceived Doge waste, if you will, is, OK, so £250,000 is going to some dubious research project into transgender dance studies or something. The question is, how much money of that £250,000 actually gets to the coalface, and how much is actually just kind of siphoned off before it actually gets to the academic at the end of the line?
Right, well, it depends where in the country, doesn't it? How much is siphoned off and how much gets the coalface. If that transgender dance studies class was happening at, a venerated establishment here in the United Kingdom, well, I'd imagine a fair amount gets to the academic, and the Toolsy needs to do his work. Now, should said transgender dance class be happening, or dance studies be happening in, somewhere in the Horn of Africa, I would imagine that probably none of it results in anybody dancing anywhere. So there you go. And it turns out that Rob wasn't Australian. It's just a "Hi, Alex." Yeah. Because it's just this sort of like detached voice. Sorry, Rob, I suggested you an Aussie, although that'd be a great thing. We love the Aussies. "Hi, Alex." Who's that?
I know, that scared the life out of me, if I'm being honest.
I quite liked it. And normally it's Tekop who's like throwing mysterious notes and beeps and things, but I don't think we can blame him for that. That wasn't his button. Right, we're going to go to a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about money a bit more, our Dogification of the world. Oh, we're going to be speaking to one of my favourites. It's Justin Urquhart-Stewart, economist and chairman of the Regionally Invest platform. If we're lucky, and if our producers do a good job, they might make sure that he's got a cat. Coming up after this.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This
Hello there, welcome back. Hi, Alex.
Hello.
Hi, Alex. I liked that in a weird way. It's sort of the look of confusion and fear on our faces, the detached voice. Right, let's now welcome to the conversation Justin Urquhart-Stewart, with or without cat. Drum roll.
Good morning, Alex. Good afternoon, rather.
Yes! Boom, there we go. We've got a cat in shot. Which one's that?
This is Betty.
Betty.
There's Betty and Boo.
Oh, hi, Betty. Oh, is she about to sort of make a crawl down the braces for a bid for freedom?
Yes. It's when she crawls up my legs and actually have to sort of draw blood as she reaches my kneecap. It's not the wild best thing to have.
The things you do for us. Well done. Oh, she's off. Well done, Justin.
Yeah.
Well done, Betty. Oh, she's settled. Right, anyway, let's get to talking about all the... to be honest, I'd rather talk about cats than the economy, if I was going to be brutally honest, but my producer, Ted, will get very angry if I did that. OK, so apparently... Sir Keir Starmer's agreed that we're going to get to the 2.5% of share of the GDP on defence spending. But apparently there's not really a pathway to get there. And all the while we're being told we need to spend more than that. Well, it turns out that Rachel Reeves will have to raise taxes by an extra £12 billion if she wants to boost the defence spending to 2.5%. I mean, she ain't afraid to raise taxes, is she? Are you expecting perhaps in the next budget things to get even worse?
Well, it's not going to be easy, but there are ways of actually achieving it. It's not necessarily a completely done thing that she has to put up income tax. We have been in positions like this before, like the banking crisis. So there is a way of doing it, which I don't particularly like, but we've done it twice so far, and that is quantitative easing. As it were, the government making its own money up by having bonds produced, which are then purchased by the Bank of England. And of course, the Bank of England and the government are, in fact, one and the same thing. So it is rather strange that a third of British government gilts are now owned by the British government. It's really very odd indeed. So what it means is actually every single year, around about 30 billion of coupon or dividends gets paid by ourselves to ourselves. You couldn't make this up. But when it comes to actually then trying to actually find finances for our defence and such like, that's one way you could try and do it. Or create a very old-fashioned thing known as war bonds, where people can actually invest in and get a return. It's got a level of guarantee behind it, make it an incentive, if you so wish, by actually saying contribute X thousand pounds, you'll get X thousand pounds off, say, the family's inheritance tax payment, which doesn't really affect the government too much. But it means it's another way of getting money in without necessarily destroying the already rather fragile debt position.
What would be the risks of the government using QE right now? I mean, I'm definitely no economist. I don't get this stuff. There are some people who say that's a really good way of going about things, but does it sort of store up a nasty surprise in the future?
Well, it does store up a nasty thing because the more you borrow, obviously you've got to pay it back, and it's going to cost you to do so. And rates have been rising in terms of institutional rates. So people trust the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom's always been a good payer of debts. We've never defaulted, never formally so anyway. Unlike most other countries, most other states, even one state in America managed to default on its debt. So we're trustworthy, but on the other hand, they'll give you money for nothing. You're going to have to pay for it somewhere along the line. So you can do quantitative easing if you so like, but the more you do, the more it hits your credibility and your confidence. And remember, that's the one word that runs an economy, whether it's you and I going out for supper, that's not an invitation, but I'm sure it'd be delightful, or whether it's just going out spending more, or more to the point, the most important thing for most people in Britain is their house or flat. And so therefore it encourage people to maybe move house, move flat, because if that happens, well, actually you spend more on the bathroom, the kitchen goes, and a whole lot of money is spent into the economy, which the government earns more money on because of VAT. So it doesn't actually cost the government a great deal of money to do this. Actually, what you're doing is creating incentives for people, particularly things like enterprise investment schemes, whereby companies can set up, and it's very brave to set up a company, a small company, because an awful lot do go bust. But to be able to provide cost-effective financing for them, again, it's by way of guarantees, so no government money going directly into it, but it allows getting more money passing through the economy, or technical term, velocity of money through the economy. Get more money going through it, and you'll actually get more tax being paid. And so therefore, it doesn't solve the debt problem, but it does mean that you can actually have access to sufficient funds to at least try and arm ourselves properly for the coming storm.
One of the ways that Rachel Reeves is looking at arming herself for the coming storm is to slash Whitehall budgets by 11%. Now, I'm actually in principle quite for this, because I do think we've got a massively over-bloated civil service. But I can't imagine many people the Labour Party will be, especially not the unions of the civil service. And there are other people calling this austerity 2.0. But do you think trimming the state itself is the way forward? And where should those cuts be made?
Well, certainly trimming the state is a very good way forward. We are bloated by all sorts of things, all of which meant well to start with. But the amount you've now got dealing with in terms of environmental issues, social issues, all of those elements, companies having to put aside significant sums of money just to make sure they're behaving correctly. Well, actually, that can be done far more cheaply. It's called discipline. It's called good management, how you run a proper business with the right ethic and attitude. You don't need a new department to try and run the wretched thing. So there's a lot of common sense can be used there, which, again, doesn't cost the government anything, and if anything else, actually will reduce the cost, because you can get rid of all the technocrats going around checking whether you've got the right blend of religious, racial, social alternatives that you've got. How to actually waste money, that's a perfect way of doing it. So at least you could do that. But after that, remember, focus on the areas we're good at. We set up a lot of small businesses. Last figures I saw, more than France and Germany put together. A lot of them are tech businesses relating to the high-tech hubs, which are all over the country, mostly around the universities. Where we're not so good is taking those small businesses and growing them, giving access to capital, and being able to grow them locally so that you don't have to depend upon Whitehall to try and make a decision, because they won't. So we're doing the good burgers of, say, Newcastle, which has got a great tech area there, same also in Manchester. Give them, not money, give them the tax-free support for a period of time. And when it comes down to us as individuals, we've got at the end of this year coming up, obviously, the stamp duty holiday being taken away. We'll extend it, or more to the point, double it. Encourage, make it more, give people more confidence, but at a time when rates are, okay, they seem low, but actually they're very high. If you've got a mortgage for, say, 5 or 6 years back, and you're only paying 1.5%, your cost of a new mortgage is not going to be double, it's going to be more than that. And that is just horrific for people. Mind you, the banks and building societies can do something about that as well by adjusting the length of terms of those debts and making them more affordable over time. But it also means the government needs to use some imagination. But imagination, not going too far like Liz Truss, where you just spook the markets, but actually show people that actually this is a system which works in the past, we can do it again, and you give people back that one word, that confidence. Do that. And as you've just been talking just now, not a great deal of that around in terms of confidence of our leaders.
No, absolutely not. Justin and Betty, thank you ever so much for your delightful and erudite company today. There you go. We didn't even need to talk to him about Doge. We've done the Doging, so now we can give Justin, he's going to be our official tax cut minister.
Can he run the Bank of England, please?
No, Betty can.
Oh, Betty, of course,
Betty can do that.
No, but I've said for a long time that, and Justin hit on it as well, that one of the big problems is we don't have no industrial strategy. We don't know what to do with the economy. We don't invest in it. We don't make it easier for businesses to actually grow. We just think, oh, here's some money. That's not the right way.
We don't even do that. We go employers' national insurance.
Yeah, we then make it more difficult.
We go, IR35, so people who might not have a business but a self or whatever it is, up. Everything, corporation tax. Up.
You go all the way back to the Napoleonic Wars when Napoleon called this nation a nation of shopkeepers, and he mentioned it as an insult. It should be a matter of pride that we build so many small businesses here. He's right. We have a huge tech sector. We're the birthplace of some major companies, and yet we just don't do anything, and we make it so hard because of this, like you said, this nonsense of you got to have the right makeup of people, and you just waste after waste after waste.
Actually, on that note, how have we only just got to? We haven't got DEI on Doge.
Yeah.
How have we missed that one? That is so important, right? I'm going to whack it in there. DEI. Gone. Right, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we're going to be talking about the fact that Gen Z and millennials throw food away before it's gone off. I'm a millennial. The things that come out of my fridge, and I'm like, that's all right, I'll do.
Yeah. If I'm hungry,
do you know what? Boomers are amazing for hoarding food. I went back to see my parents in Gloucester about a week ago. I can't remember what I was looking for. I was rifling through the cupboards, and I found this Christmas pudding in a cardboard box. And the use-by date was the year 2000.
Oh, yeah. I think there's stuff in my parents' cupboards. It's 2 logos ago. Like, it's changed company.
It's not like 2 years ago. It's two logos ago. Yeah, exactly. Sometimes products that don't even... I found a bottle of Crusher, some sort of syrup you add to milk to make milkshakes, which I remember from my childhood. That might not even exist anymore.
That's a biological weapon by this point.
Even better. But guess where the Christmas pudding came from? You talk about 2 logos ago. The Christmas pudding came from Safeway.
Oh my God.
I know, it's amazing. I used to work at that Safeway. Probably brought it home myself.
Yeah, probably.
Probably brought it home from the sort of back of the supermarket where it had already gone off. Oh, right. Anyway, but they're not like us, these youngsters. Gen Zs and millennials apparently throw food away before it's gone off. We're going to be discussing that after this.
$500 million Europeans are looking for 340 million Americans to protect them from 140 million Russians who haven't been able to defeat 30 million Ukrainians in over 3 years. There is something seriously wrong. Now, there's a lot that none of us understand yet about what the objectives of Donald Trump are, but it's very, very clear that Europe now needs to stand up and pay a lot more.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Hello, welcome back to the show. Well, as Peter and I were discussing just before the break, apparently Gen Z and millennials are just lobbing food in the bin all the time, well ahead of its use-by date or even best before display until date. They don't know how their elders used to live. It's probably because their elders are the ones buying the food. The minute you start having to, deal with your own larder, believe me, you ain't throwing things away. You're basically sniffing it instead. But geniusly, a chap called Jake Blaisdell co-founded a company called Remy, and Remy is an app that leverages AI to reduce users' household food waste by 70% while saving them time and money. Essentially, what Jake seems to have come up with is food Doge. That's right, he'll sit there and audit your cupboards and tell you what needs to be cut and what you can keep. Let's speak to him now. Hi, Jake. How are you doing?
Hi, Alex. I'm great, thanks. How about you?
Yeah, I am good. You're going to use that, aren't you, food Doge?
100%. I'm going to clip this, put it straight on TikTok.
Woohoo! Right, now, tell us about your app. I mean, and also, what did you invent the app? Because actually, you knew this. You knew there were loads of young people just chucking stuff in the bin that was perfectly viable.
100%. So I think the idea of the app came from when I was at university. I founded this with my my best friend from university. We'd come home every evening, we'd open our fridge, and it was honestly pretty disgusting in there, as you can imagine. Student flat, so we'd have to throw everything in the bin. We felt incredibly guilty about this. So we did a bit of research into why people like us are throwing away their food. We found it was for 4 key reasons. So people don't know what's in their kitchen and when it's going to expire. When we were going to the store, we didn't have a clear plan as to what we were going to buy. So we bought loads of random ingredients. When it was time to actually incorporate these ingredients into our meals, we didn't have an effective way of doing that. We didn't have the knowledge. And finally, we've heard over and over that just managing your kitchen sustainably takes a lot of time. And this is time that we simply didn't have. So we built Remy, which, as you said, uses AI to reduce household food waste by 70%. But really importantly, by using up all your food, you're saving a lot of time and money. So from Remy, you can see what's in your kitchen, when it's going to expire, the meals you can make with your ingredients, and then if you're missing anything, you can order it directly through the app.
So when you've got that jar of almost funky goji berries, you can sort of go onto the app and it says, no, these goji berries will last another week. And what's more, here's a flan you could stick it in.
Exactly. We're taking a more proactive approach to food waste. So sending you the notifications before your ingredients are going to expire and showing you how you can use them with everything else that's in your kitchen.
What is the discrepancy between, you know, the sell-by date and a lot of food out there? Because I remember this being reviewed before. Was it under the last government where they were basically saying, you know, display dates, sell-by dates are different. And actually, when it comes to especially things like dairy, people should just give it the good old-fashioned sniff test. It worked for generations before we had all this labelling. But is there on some products just a huge amount of discrepancy between when people think that they, you know, have to use it by and actually it'll go on, like, you know, on a pirate ship for decades?
100%. I'm an expert, some would say, in this field, but I'm still kind of working out what each one means. So I mean, use by is kind of a sign of safety, whether best before means if you don't use it now, it's going to start to decline in quality. I think what's really, really interesting, and you touched upon this when it comes to milk. I was recently told that the first ever person to put any expiration date on anything was actually Al Capone. He, I know, right?
Random facts, I love that. Okay, yeah, I'm all ears.
The reason being, and there are a couple different reasons as to why people think, but I think I know which one I think. So either his brother got really ill from some milk and he wanted to make sure that no one else got ill from milk, so put the expiration dates on milk. What I think the reason was is after the prohibition, he had all these bottling factories and wanted to bottle the milk himself, and he wanted to turn over as much milk as possible, so put expiration dates on the milk so people would throw it away once it had gone bad, which it probably hadn't gone bad at that point, so he could sell more. Now I think the supermarkets have a similar tactic that they're employing.
Do you know, you're probably right. I always say that big food especially are pretty indiscriminate and unscrupulous when it comes to the way that they fund their industry. I mean, Pete, your thoughts on this? I love the idea of food.
I think it's brilliant. I think it's absolutely brilliant. And I can remember when I was at university, the amount of food we used to throw away was ridiculous. And also, I think you really strike on something, is that why are people not taught this at schools? And like, that is a huge thing about managing your budgets, managing how to cook and, you know, look after yourself, and these kind of basic things, you know, we just don't teach young people to do. And then we suddenly wander around saying, well, how don't you know it? Well, if you've never told somebody, you can't expect them to know it. And I think the educational kind of deficit there is a major factor that we have to definitely have to fix. And hopefully apps like Remy will We'll kickstart.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been at school for
I mean, I'm even
1,000
tempted
years.
to download it now.
I've been at school for 1,000 years. It's a long time since I was sort of like rattling around the corridors of a high school. But we didn't really have any lessons into food. We had some sort of cursory. I think I made an egg mayonnaise sandwich or something once. I think that was
Fruit
it.
salad.
And learnt where to put things in a fridge, and I think that was about it. But is this taught in schools now? Are people told how to cook and then how to sort of home economics, manage the economics of your kitchen?
I mean, I think you raised a really good point. I think we had cooking kind of classes at school, but I think we've grown up in a world where we've always had use-by dates on our packaging, so we don't know anything else. I think as a result, we just follow them kind of religiously, and that's problematic. What's really interesting is a couple supermarkets are starting to take these use-by dates. See, use-by, sell-by, expiry date, I don't even know which one to use. There are so many, it's so confusing. But they're starting to take them off fruit and veg, which will force people to start, smelling, tasting, looking, and really ensuring that they're using all their ingredients before they actually go bad. I think it's interesting. I mean, there's no kind of legal, it's not legally binding to have expiration dates on fruit and veg. So taking them off is having hopefully a really positive impact.
Yeah, I mean, I just think fruit and veg shouldn't be even being packaged in the first place.
I think there's a really good point that you made earlier was actually about having a plan what you're going to buy.
Yeah.
Because that's also the financial aspect of this that is there as well.
You look like you're in a hostage video.
Yeah, I know. I'm very aware of how.
it really brings out your sort of pallor as well.
Wearing all black.
Thank you ever so much, Jake. Fantastic conversation. Good to see someone actually doing something to stop the profligate waste of the younger generations. But it's interesting when you talk about cooking. So I mean, Ricky's going to come in a minute and shake his head because I'm not allowed to talk about cooking. But one thing, if we learnt the lessons that our grandparents knew, it saves you so much money and your food is even more delicious. So I usually like buying the cheaper cuts of meat. The cheaper cuts of meat are by far the best. They've basically been, and again, food industry working in funny ways, they've essentially been demonised because, they've got too much animal fat in them. Well, it turns out a lot of animal fat, naturally occurring fat, actually lowers cholesterol, lowers blood pressure, and guess what, ladies, it's really, really good for the collagen in your skin, all that connective tissue on a bone and the skin packed full of collagen. And I'm a big old fan of buying like a good piece of meat, and I get my bones and I roast them and I boil them up and I make my own stock. And all these young people are going and buying bone broth.
Yeah, I remember you telling me all about that for about 20 minutes.
What are you paying £5 for bone broth for?
Yeah, that's
Take
true.
the bones out. Don't get the sort of ready boned and ready skinned chicken thigh. Get all the stuff.
Yeah, but again, I wouldn't even know where to start. So.
Oh, I'll teach you one day. I love a good bone. I do. All right, Ian, how are you doing, my darling? Listen, you're a professional. You're supposed to talk.
Oh dear. The best way, by the way, is to get down to your local abattoir.
Oh, that's quite really.
Yeah, get in there. Ask for a bag of bones. You got a bag of bones, please? I'll do your bag of bones sandwich. You want big, large, small, bovine, piglet, anything you like.
Wow.
Yeah, you might have to palm him a fiver for the troubles, but that'll sort your broth out.
So you can basically have a cauldron of bones at that point.
Yeah. You can.
I'm not sure how much I fancy visiting the abattoir.
We went down there as kids because the biology lesson. Well, the biology lesson says you've got to bring in an eyeball, and people going, you've got to go to the butcher's to get an eyeball. We decided.
That these days.
Tell you what we'll do. We'll go to the abattoir because there was one at the end of this.
Did they have just like a pot of eyeballs waiting for the small kids?
They stood us in there waiting while we watched the whole process of what goes on in an abattoir. We were about 13.
Oh.
We couldn't quite work out whether it was sort of, informative or disturbing.
I would say disturbing.
Every time I see a cow now, I want to punch it. So maybe that's the.
This has taken on such a strange
really
turn.
Has, yeah. I don't know how we're going to get from that to Ukraine, but we can give it a go in the next hour.
Yeah, well, but we could probably get from that to farming, and that's been a big topic today.
Farming is always a big topic. The farming, and there's farms in Ukraine.
Yeah.
So there's the connection.
Depending what sort of land that Russia gets in this deal, if they get